Yes. So, and now through the discovery process, I've been able to review a lot of the transcripts and also talk with a lot of the lawyers who were involved and witnesses that were involved in the special purpose grand jury. But that's what they did. They used that process to subpoena, particularly out-of-state witnesses. So in Georgia, it's always difficult when we have a witness who's out of state because we have the interstate compact. We have to get a certification to get a witness subpoenaed from out of state. It is not easy. It is one of the more difficult aspects of our job. So they use the grand jury process, the special purpose grand jury process, to bring in testimony and bring in witnesses from out of state. They issued a lot of target letters to people back and forth. That there was a lot of people that were targets and then weren't targets who testified, maybe negotiated some type of immunity, things like that throughout that special purpose grand jury.
Okay. And is that made public to other defense attorneys if immunity has been granted to any witnesses?
I don't know if it was made public originally. I know that some of it has been provided to us through discovery. We had a motions hearing where the judge ordered that the state give us copies of transcripts because they had everything recorded. So there's a transcript from the special purpose grand jury. It's my understanding there's a transcript from just about everything, but it does appear like sometimes that was cut off. So there are some sections that were recorded and then maybe a section wasn't recorded and then they went back on the record. But it was recorded, which we rarely get in a regular grand jury. We rarely, if ever, get that type of testimony. So that was very unique to have.
Is the state required to let you know if they've granted immunity to any witnesses that may have been utilized in the special grand jury process in seeking the indictment?
Yes, they are. And, some of that has been given to us through discovery. Some of it has been given to us from other attorneys, the attorneys who maybe represented those parties. There was a lot of back and forth. There were a lot of, in this, I believe this was all public, that some of our state representatives, I think the governor in particular, were subpoenaed, and there was a back and forth over who could grant immunity, who had the power in that office to grant immunity, and that's something that I reviewed in my work on this motion with the DA's office, because Mr. Wade was the one that took over that power. And so the emails that were attached to a lot of the pleadings, it was interesting. It first started out that there was someone else in the DA's office who's actually an employee of the DA's office who was negotiating all of that. And then it evolved to another member of the DA's staff, and then ultimately it was Mr. Wade, and there's emails where he said, I'm the only one that can grant immunity. I'm the only one that has the power to do this. I'm in charge.
Was he engaged or involved in the special grand jury process?
Oh, very much so. He was by far the lead of it.
Right. And do you have the timeline of when that special grand jury was authorized and when it began to meet?
Yes, I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but there is an order, and I can review it. I brought some of the pleadings with me, but it was authorized sometime. So he was appointed, the timeline, he was appointed in November 2021 to work on this case. It was sometime after that Ms. Willis sought the special purpose grand jury and got authority to do that. And then that went through, several months, and then they issued a report to her.
So he was hired by the Fulton County DA's office before the special grand jury was authorized or impaneled? Okay. And so he was involved from the very beginning of that process.
Yes, and he was actually hired, I believe, before it was even, I know it was before it was impaneled. I believe it was before the order was even issued, though.
And do you know what his role was as what's the official term, a special assistant district attorney?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. He usually goes by special counsel or special prosecutor. I don't believe he goes by special assistant district attorney. I don't think he's permitted to do that. I've studied these statutes a lot, and there's no real term for it. I've heard him go by independent counsel, things like that, but I don't really think independent counsel would be an appropriate term because he's not independent. So I've studied, I did not know this before, but I've studied, the structure of the independent counsel in the federal system. They're actually a separate office. They have their own appropriations to have a separate office, and they are kept separate from the U.S. Attorney's Office. So that would be where you get the independent counsel term from, or independent prosecutor. He goes by special usually, so special prosecutor or special counsel, and I think that's because he's not independent.
Is this commonly used in the state of Georgia? I don't know the scope of your practice. I'm not familiar with DAs doing this often.
No, and so I do practice throughout the state, and I've practiced in almost every county in the state at some point in my career, and it is very rare. I've had instances where there is special counsel, but those are very limited, and I can tell you about those, and then I can also tell you what I did to investigate that, because I had the same question. So first...
Just so you'll know why we're asking, the scope of this committee is we've heard a lot of the allegations, and you, as a matter of fact, made most of them, or made
right.
some of these public, and there's of course a public, outrage or uproar or concerns about some of the alleged improprieties that you have brought forth, both within the in the system, kind of what's appropriate conduct,
right.
And also financial improprieties. And we're tasked with investigating and finding the true facts, and not just taking the press at face value. And that's why we're asking you for documents, et cetera, so we can independently verify the various allegations that have been made. But we're also specifically tasked with, if necessary, amending existing statutes.
Right.
Or creating new statutes to build guardrails or whatever to essentially restore the public faith in our criminal justice system, in its impartiality and its fairness. And I have looked at some of the existing statutes, but it's very sketchy. What is the real authority? And we wonder if we need statutory authority or statutory limitations. And so I want to explore with you a little bit what the authority is for a special grand jury to be conducting a criminal investigation, and also the use of a special assistant district attorney is what I'm referring it to. Right. But and so that's the context. You have done that research, so help walk us through this just a little bit. Is there a statutory process that gives authority to utilize a special grand jury to advise a DA or to essentially accumulate evidence for a DA to determine whether or not to indict?
Right. So the first question was about whether this happens throughout the state or not. I did do open records to every single district attorney in the entire state of Georgia to find out, because I wanted to know, I knew based on my practice that it was a very rare process, but I wanted to know, I wanted the data. I wanted to actually see it. So we did an open records for every single district attorney. We have received responses from almost all of them. There's only a couple that we haven't, but I don't know that those would be big factors. The few that were remaining, I think it was Augusta that I haven't received one from. But I talked with two of the prosecutors in those districts. There's only two that actually use something that would be akin to this. And one of them said they haven't done it in years, but they have done it. And they pay between $40 and $40 an hour, which tends to be about the going rate for appointed counsel. It's between $40 and $60 an hour, I know, for appointed counsel in most counties. And then the other county that did use them, they use a part-time solicitor. And that DA said every time that they would have maybe some overflow work, an appeal or something that they had extra work to do, they would hire this part-time solicitor. So it was someone who was already a government employee, and they would pay $45 an hour for this person to do work. So those are the only people. This is a very unique to Fulton County, which I assumed, but I didn't know until I did the research. Nobody does this but Fulton County. And the AG's office does it, and so we got a lot of arguments from the state about, well, the Attorney General's office does it, but that's a whole different statute. It's not even the same section. So the Attorney General is authorized because they represent all of the state agencies. They are authorized to hire outside counsel, and they have to because there's a lot of conflict issues, and so it makes sense. So you've got different needs for hiring outside counsel. You've got conflicts if there's a conflict, and if there's a conflict, you'd have to hire someone who's outside of the office. You couldn't hire someone like in this case, like Mr. Wade, to be special counsel because they're in the office. So you can't, when you have a legal conflict, you have to have, the offices have to be separate. So with the AG, that's usually what happens. Sometimes it's specialized knowledge. I mean, you've got people who are representing commissioners. You've got people who are representing, people in certain agencies in the state, in certain types of power. And so it might be a specialized practice area. So the Attorney General is authorized, and they actually publish it on their website, all of the rates. It's very transparent. So I went through and looked at everybody's rate. I mean, it's very transparent. How much they pay, it's based on experience. They get approval for that. They get approval for the appropriations for it. And it's just extremely transparent, which is in direct contradiction to how it works in Fulton County.
And do you know how many judicial districts we have in Georgia? I don't.
I do not. I could look at my open records request. So the judicial districts, there would be a district attorney for each of those, and so those are who I sent all of those.
It's over 50. I want to say 59.
It's over 50. I think it's 59, but I'm not positive.
That's what I think.
I think it's 59.
So out of those 59, you reached out to all of them to see if their district attorney's offices for each judicial circuit ever utilized a special assistant, outside counsel.
Yes.
Okay. And out of those, only 3 of them have ever done it?
Only 2.
Only 2.
Only 2 had ever done
Fulton
it.
County is one of them.
Only 2. Well, yes. I'm sorry. It's 3 counting Fulton County.
Okay.
I did not send an open records to Fulton County on that because I already knew that they did it.
Is there a statute that authorizes that?
There is a statute, and I cite it, if I may, I cite it in my brief.
Feel free.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to misquote it. Let's see. So it's 15-80-20. And how I came to learn that is I actually contacted the Prosecuting Attorneys Council early on in this case, and because I was trying to figure out the legality of this. I did open records, and I found out how much money the special counsels in this case were being paid. And there's about 20 different people in Fulton County that are paid under this type of arrangement. It's the largest personnel budget item in the DA's office.
Why wouldn't you just hire more assistant DAs and have them in-house?
That's what I didn't understand, and that's what, I mean, in my opinion, obviously, I think that's what should happen. But the reason that it wouldn't happen is because if you're hired as an assistant DA, you can't take private work. So the statutes, and they're all in section 1518, 15-18. The one that gives the authority for this is 20. But all of those, if you read all of them, it makes it very clear that if you're going to hire more assistant DAs, they have to be paid the statutory rate. So you can't just pay an assistant DA anything you want. You could not pay them $300,000, something like that.
What is that statutory rate?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but it is in the statute. I know that, like, District Attorney Willis, for example, I think it's around $200,000, and that's one of the top paid people. So most of the people are paid, somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000, something like that, depending on their role, depending on county supplements. So what the statute says is it gives a state salary, and then you can get a county supplement. But all of that is around that range. I'd say around $150,000. But there's limitations. So to answer your question, why you wouldn't just hire an assistant district attorney, first, they couldn't make as much money as independent counsels, or I'm sorry, not independent, special counsels, couldn't make that much money, but they also would be limited in their law practice. They wouldn't be able to have private practice, and that's by statute. So if you are hired as an assistant DA, you cannot have a private law practice also.
Do you know how many there are in Fulton County DA's office?
How many special prosecutors?
No, how many assistant district attorneys?
No, I actually open records that, and it was declined. So we actually have a pending open records lawsuit, which I did bring. I asked for that. I asked for how many were hired, when they were fired, and they declined to give me that under the Open Records Act. So we ended up filing a lawsuit, and that's still pending.
Because it just occurs to me, I think there's certainly dozens of them.
Yes.
Maybe 100.
I think 100 would be a fair example, or a fair number based on just my knowledge of it. But there's quite a few, and if you had a certain amount of money that they spend several $1 million on these special prosecutors, that could be spent on a lot more assistant district attorneys.
Do you know the process in Fulton County on how you approve the budget for the DA's office? Is that something controlled by the county, or does the DA have total discretion?
It's controlled by the county, and I do know I actually went back and watched a lot of budget meetings. They have their budget meetings online. I read a lot of the transcripts, and so it's very interesting. It's kind of a long answer, though. Depending on who you are, in Fulton County depends on how your budget is approved. So, for example, the county attorney, if they want to hire special counsel, okay, and pay them hourly, like in this case, they go and they get that approved at the county level. They actually appear in front of the county Board of Commissioners and say, we need to hire this person at this rate, and they approve the rate. They monitor the bills. They do all of that stuff. So that's what happens at the county attorney's office.
Okay, the county attorney represents the county, is not prosecuting criminals like the DA does.
Correct. It's civil. So the county attorney does all civil things. In this case, they actually did end up representing the DA in some of the open records issues, which is a whole other issue. So the county attorney, the civil body, they actually go and get county approval from the Board of Commissioners. And there's actually a resolution. So I think I attached as an example in one of my briefs a copy of a resolution just to give as an example. I'm pretty sure I did. And it's very transparent. They get it approved. Yeah, here it is. It's called a resolution, and it's a resolution authorizing funding for additional personnel. And basically, they go and they say, we need this for this project. We need this budgetary item, and it's approved. It comes out of their budget, though, so they're not going and asking for more money for the county attorney's budget. They're just asking to use the county money that they've already been allotted for this special counsel. The district attorney has taken a different position, and I was surprised, so I watched hundreds of hours of Board of County Commissioners meetings just to make sure that I wasn't missing anything, that she never went and asked for approval for any of these special prosecutors.
Her budget is granted through the Fulton County?
It is.
It's in part of its budget?
It is. These special prosecutors have been paid a couple different ways. They were paid with state seizure money. So the first, around $100,000 of Mr. Wade's funding came from state seizure money. It appeared from looking at the budgets for the state seizure that fund ran out. So then it started coming from the general fund. But it was money so Ms. Willis had a budget right around the time that she hired Mr. Wade and these other special prosecutors. She went and asked for more money for a backlog. And so she was given extra money, and that money's been renewed since. It was given to her to hire 55 additional personnel, and it's actually in the resolution. She went in front of the Board of County Commissioners and asked for it.
When was that? Do you know?
I do, actually, because I attached it to my brief. So I know the dates of things. September 15th, 2021. Is when she presented her PowerPoint to the Fulton County Board of County Commissioners, and she gave a lot of statistics about all the unindicted homicides. It was mainly about homicides. It is, there was some about sexual offenses, but it was almost all about homicides. She said that, why am I here? The great trifecta: crime is on the rise, historic mismanagement, and then the COVID backlog. And so she asked for quite a bit of money to hire additional personnel. It was, I can tell you, that year it was $780,000.
And that's in the fall of 2021, just before this special grand jury was impaneled?
Yes. So that happened. She was awarded that money September 15th, 2021, and she actually did get the resolution and the process that you would normally expect.
How much was that addition or increase to her budget?
Not to exceed $5 million.
Wow.
So she was awarded for the end of 2021, which this is September 15th. She was awarded for September until December 31st, $780,000. It said, and then the next year, not to exceed up to $5 million.
So hang on for 1 minute. My vice chairman here, Chairman Dolezal, is way more high-tech oriented than I am.
Okay.
He has downloaded some of your documents that you produced to us that I had asked him to have available so we could see them here. And I think you have produced to us this PowerPoint presentation that Ms. Willis made to the county commission in September of '21 to allegedly fund backlog of murder cases, et cetera.
Yes,
right? Okay.
that would be Exhibit A to that motion. Yes,
Okay.
that's it.
And is that
Hi,
what we have
Michael.
on the screen here? Let's see if we can flip
Hi,
this one right.
everyone. Thank you for coming.
It is.
Okay. So this is part of her PowerPoint presentation for additional funding over and above her previously appropriated budget from the county?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. So what were the county procedures for approval of funding for, additional outside counsel, or in this case, it sounded like she was going to hire 55 people in-house to help
Right.
with the backlog. Does the county have guidelines or rules or regulations as to how you get funding approved for either additional staff to work on her backlog of homicides or for special counsel to assist you?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
What are those proper procedures?
You have to get approval by the Board of County Commissioners. And the statute that I cited originally, 1820, that statute actually is the one that it says that you can hire additional personnel like this, but it has to have county approval.
Okay.
So, the statute says it already. When you were asking about changing statutes, it's clear in the statute that it has to be approved by either local law or the governing authority, which would be the county in this place, and in this instance. And it's very specific that it can't be paid with state funds.
Anything in that September 15th of 2021 proposal or request for funding that addressed or contemplated special counsel to pursue indictments against folks for election fraud?
No, not at all. And I watched the video. It's online. Her speech, where she used the PowerPoint in the speech. There's nothing about that at all. And in fact, what was submitted was pretty specific. It was to hire 55 new employees, not contractors, employees, in November 2021 and December 2021. And I did open records based on this, asking who was hired and the dates of hire, because I wanted to be able to track that, and that was denied.
And who made that denial, the DA's office or the county?
The DA's office. And I did bring the open records lawsuit, just in case you had any questions about that. So it was the county, and I can tell you when I filed it. Let me see. And we went back and forth, and I requested it several times, but it was Dexter Bond at the DA's office who sent a letter back and said, we don't have that. We don't have to give it to you. He's
like the chief assistant for Fonnie Willis.
He is, and he's also the one who went to the Board of County Commissioners whenever they needed funding. So, if they had some large printing, and they had a big rebranding campaign where they had a lot of money that was spent on this rebranding, like posters and things like that around the office, and he had to go and testify in front of the Board of County Commissioners to get that paid because they were not paying it. So he's sort of the go-between with the Board of County Commissioners. His official title is something like Chief Legal Officer or something like that. But he's an attorney.
So you've gone back and reviewed all of the Fulton County Commission's minutes and records to see what requests were made and if there was a resolution granting the additional funding?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Was there ever a request for additional funding for a special prosecutor to pursue these election cases?
No, there wasn't, and I knew that before we got the district attorney's response, but subsequently we got a response from the district attorney's office that said, we didn't do it, we don't have to do it, I'm a constitutional officer. So their argument was, we don't have to comply with those statutes or those rules, because she's saying she's a constitutional officer, so she doesn't have to get county approval. She can spend her budget however she wants.
Then why would she have gotten county approval for the other 55 attorneys?
So what I've surmised is that was because those were staff members, and so she went and asked for additional budgetary money. She needed a higher budget. So for those 55 people, she went and asked for more money because she didn't have enough money. And once she was awarded that, it's her position now that she can spend that money however she wants.
Doesn't have to use it for 55 new staff. She can use it for Special Attorney General.
Yes.
Not attorney generals, the
Special
DA.
counsel,
Okay,
right, yes,
counsel.
essentially. That is their argument in their reply briefs that they filed in court, that they have inherent authority, they don't have to comply with the county ordinances, don't have to comply with the statute.
So they don't have to comply with our state statute.
That they have, once they're awarded the budget, they can use that budget however. I mean, how their motion, and I'm happy to send the motion, it's public record, but how their motion argued it was, if they get $5 million, they can pay that to one person if they want, as long as because the voters authorized her to do that. So the county, their position is the county authorizes a budget, and she can pretty much has inherent authority to do it however.
Even though she specifically asked for the money to prosecute backlogged homicide cases in Atlanta.
Yes.
Okay. What's your opinion on that? You think the statute or county procedures permit that?
No, I do not. And I cited several different county ordinances. So when I read the statute, when I read 15-1820, and it makes sense, it makes sense intuitively. As lawyers, when we bill, someone is reviewing our bills. I mean, that's just, that's the process. If you're in private practice, your client authorizes your bills. If you're doing public defense, which I've done public defense, I've done appointed work, the governing agency approves my bills, and they will cut them. They will regularly cut them if they're too high. And so there's always some type of budgetary authority that's reviewing everything. So I thought it was very strange that in this case there isn't one, and that there's really no oversight because it is public money. So I know that it's an elected official, but it's still public money. And I don't live in Fulton County, so it would probably aggravate me more if I did.
So we have the code section up that you're referencing for prosecuting attorneys getting additional personnel. That's what Mr. Wade would qualify as, correct?
Yes. So under B, that's the section that authorizes the appointment of special counsel. And it says the manner and amount of compensation to be paid is fixed by either local act or by the district attorney with the approval of the county. And so that's where that's our argument that this was not
actually more
because it did not have county approval.
Like,
So our state
when did
law
she do
requires
this? When
if
did
a
she,
DA is going to go
because
seek
did she know she was going to have to
outside
try a
counsel on
case
the
this
call,
large
that must
when
be
she
approved
asked for
by
that
the
money
county
and she just
commission.
had to reappropriate it? Hi, Kim.
And there are only 3 circuits that have even utilized this procedure.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what rates of pay were approved in those other judicial districts, or whether they went through some type of approval?
So one was $40 and one was $45, and the annual amount that they spent did not exceed $2,000.
And what did Mr. Wade receive?
He's received about $700,000 so far.
And what's he paid per hour?
$250 an hour.
Has Fulton County been given any opportunity to approve or reject those bills, or the fact that he's even hired?
No. So, and that's an interesting point.
Yes. Colin Allred, congratulations. I fucking love him.
They don't have to have the actual bills approved. So she is the one that approves the bills. So essentially what happens was he would submit an invoice and she would sign off on it and send it to purchasing, and then purchasing would pay for it. So their argument in their motion was that the oversight is by purchasing
Was
saying
there abuse of
a
it?
pay,
I wanna see the
that she would be the
data.
one
I
that
want
reviewed the
data.
time.
Hi,
So Ms.
Rip
Willis
Room,
reviews the
Crutch
time, and then it gets
Bunch.
submitted to purchasing, and purchasing then pays it. And so that's the oversight, in her opinion, in the state's opinion, the oversight is from purchasing, but purchasing just gets a bill and pays it. They don't actually look at it and see if the work's done.
Does Ms. Willis do that? Is she required to approve these bills submitted by the special counsel?
So the contracts indicate that the bills are submitted to her. She doesn't sign off on all of them. A lot of them were signed off on by other people in her office, purchasing people and things like that. So there's no evidence that I was able to find that she actually scrutinized these bills or reviewed them or anything like that, but she may have.
Okay. And you mentioned that attorneys that are working for state agencies or
doing a
whatever,
lot of
including the
surmising
special
in this
assistant
here.
attorney generals, submit bills on like itemized statement on
Colin's
what
amazing.
services they've rendered?
Yes, and the Attorney General has very specific guidelines on that. What you can bill for, how you have to bill, and is told to remind. There's a reminder that this is public service. So essentially, be judicious in your billing.
Right. You go voluntarily get underpaid to be able to
Right.
and help the public.
And a lot of people view it as public service, I think.
Are those bills submitted in like tenths of, I do some billing, in my job, and it's usually tenth of an hour.
Yes.
Are there rules or guidelines or sort of standards of practice and how you bill?
Yes. So most law firms, I know because my husband used to work at a law firm, is 6-minute increments, and that's how most lawyers bill in the private sector. Public, it appears that most of them are in 10-minute increments. I know that that's what all of the indigent defense groups, they all are 10-minute increments, but I've never seen anything above that.
Okay. And on the open records request you made to the other judicial circuits, how did those outside counsel bill?
I honestly, I would have to go back and look. They were very small bills, though. They were making less than $2,000 a year, so they were small bills, and they were project based, which I think is also different. They would be hired to do a certain project.
Okay. If Miss Willis had hired a
to do a specific project
employee, one of these 55 employees, and tasked them with the job of going through a special grand jury process and helping seek indictments, investigate these allegations.
Thank you so much.
What's the most they could have made?
Well, first, she couldn't have hired Mr. Wade because it violates county policy. So she would not have been able to hire Mr. Wade as an employee.
How does that violate county policy?
They have a lot of policies on nepotism, relationships, personal.
I don't know
there's a lot of
this is
guidelines in the
structured.
county
Good
policies.
morning.
So she would not have been able to hire him.
I'm just not sure how
They would not
this
have been
hearing
approved.
is
And that would be
structured,
something
to
that
be
actually
honest.
would
I
have to be
happened
approved by
upon
the
it
county.
and thought,
because of their relationship, that wouldn't
that sounds
happen.
She
interesting.
wouldn't have been allowed to hire him because of violations of other county policies?
Yes.
He couldn't have been a direct employee of the district attorney's office?
Exactly. He
This
could not.
process circumvented those rules and ethical obligations?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
So
Let's say it wasn't Mr. Wade.
So if it wasn't Mr. Wade and someone else, I believe most of the other prosecutors on this case make around $175,000 annually.
I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that was the
Okay.
answer. So if she had hired Mr. Wade or somebody else as a salaried employee, they would make around $175,000, most likely.
So using this technique that didn't obtain approval and didn't have to follow the ethical guidelines of her own office, she was able to pay him $700,000 over 2 or 3 years.
Yes, and
Way more than he would have made as an employee.
way more, and also he's
Okay.
able to have a private practice.
I
which
think,
is
Jam.
significant
Hi,
because you're not able
J-Rance.
to have a private
Or
practice
Liproo.
if
I
you're an
think
employee.
she's
So
announcing that
that's
she's
a
going to
big
run for no
issue.
labels.
Have you reviewed his bill?
She's going to be
Yes.
third party. That's what I predict. I predict
Senator
she's going to
Belzo,
run
will you
third
give
party.
us an example of one? I think we have one. We're just
She's going to be the
pull
no
up
labels
randomly
candidate or
kind of.
something
Okay,
weird like
is
that. I don't know.
An example of the type of invoices he would submit?
Yes, it is. And so
That's an actual one, isn't it?
that is an
I'm
actual
so
one, and
glad
there's
you're
a couple things on
back.
this. You asked earlier about the authorization that stamp.
This is
that says
the
okay to
Georgia
pay.
Senate
I believe
committee
that's Dexter
on
Bond's,
something,
signature.
and
So
this
that
this
was-
bitch is
that was
testifying
one
that
where, Ms.
Willis
didn't approve it or didn't
misappropriated
review it,
funds, or
at least as
basically
far as we know
accusing
from
her of
signature.
professional
But her chief
misconduct.
legal officer did.
And
Right.
so,
he would-
in the
they would do that
hiring
stamp
of
and pay
Nathan
to pay,
Wade. So
sign it,
she's
and
like
then
a
send
dog
it
with
to
a bone.
purchasing. But yes, this is one of
But
the
that's what
bills.
it is.
And so
I
he
just
had
happened
monthly
upon it this
caps,
morning. I didn't know it was happening.
which-
Apparently no
which
one did.
went up. There were a couple different contracts that were renewed. So we had one contract that expired, another contract, and the monthly cap was $35,000 a month. So that's where you see the total. But this billing is not something that you would normally see.
All right, well, I'm noticing it lists the day and just a number of hours. There's no real itemization of exactly
be
how
the
much
next
time you
Trump
spend
lawyer.
doing whatever type of task.
That's what.
Right.
That's what.
There's none at all.
That's
And I
what's gonna
tried to get,
happen.
I also open records because in Fulton County you have a badge to access everywhere. So I didn't open records for his badge access. I was told he didn't have a badge. I was told by other witnesses that he did. So, I don't know. But that you would, if you were doing these things in the office, you would. I used to be a Fulton County employee.
really do.
You
I
have to
love
scan,
that
and
for
they keep track
you.
of all of that.
I
So you have to
love
scan your
it.
badge to get in
I
to
love
certain
it.
places. So
Bye,
if he's
Kim.
doing this, even as a contractor, contractors at the jail
Happy
have
tree
badges.
trimming today.
The medical providers have badges. They all have the badges that they scan. I open records to the sheriff
Good morning,
and the
Noel.
DA's office, and both of them told me that he did not have a card, an access card. But in order to do this, I would assume he would have to have one to get into the DA's office, and I have been told that he had one, and those you'd be able to see when he went in and out. But I was denied that.
Anything unusual or irregular about, this is just an example, Bill, about the way he billed the county?
Completely. I mean, you would never see this. This is what I would call block billing. So one of them, for example, it's 28 hours over the course of 2 or 3 days. Team investigation meeting and drafting. I went back and looked to try and see, a lot of these were like drafting. And at the time, I'm not sure what would have been drafted because most of this was during the special purpose grand jury. So there's not really a whole lot of drafting. We've obviously never seen anything that he specifically has drafted. But I also calculated these team investigation meetings. So the majority of the billing are things like meeting with team. So if you see here, it's got team investigation meeting. Then it's got team meeting and argument prep. And then meeting with team. Most of his billing is meeting with team. Team meeting, team investigation, team brain drain. He called it different things like that. But I went through, and that's the majority of the bill.
And this wouldn't be standard from what you see at block bill in 8-hour increments instead of, you said, 6-minute increments, or
no.
More specifically, and does not really give a lot of identification of what's being done.
It gives pretty much zero, in my opinion, identification. I mean, this is not something that we would be able to submit to a client ever. I can't imagine. I mean, they would, if I billed them $2,000 for 8 hours of meeting with a team on one day, and just research without what I'm researching. I mean, you have to be detailed in your bills because that's accountability. I mean, that's the only way as lawyers we can be accountable. Our clients aren't sitting in our office while we're researching, so I have to say what I'm doing.
And somebody has to approve it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's ultimately Fonnie Willis that was approving these either personally or through her designated assistants.
Yes.
And there was a written contract with Mr. Wade and the Fulton County DA's office.
I think she is, I'm not sure how this actually happened, to be honest.
Am I right that there were, I think I've reviewed your documents, that there were more than one contract?
Okay,
yes,
it actually
there were.
Doesn't,
is this
it
the
doesn't
first one?
change the evidence against
yes, that's the first one.
Right, so
19 individuals. It just doesn't change it. It doesn't make it go away.
And go through October
Give me a copy. Good
31st
morning.
of 22.
Yes.
Okay. So that contract began before there was even authorization to have a special grand jury, and later in November of 21?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Does it specify that that's what his role was going to be, or is there any way that's disclosed to the public what he was doing?
The problem is,
up at the top, I believe it says,
gets taken away from her
let's
office.
see.
It gets taken away from her entire
It
office.
just says attorney consultant.
and
This
given
one,
to
so if you
whoever,
look under whereas, the first
or
whereas,
it goes away
says
altogether.
to provide legal services
So there
regarding
is a lot on the
anti-corruption
line
matters.
for this
So,
bullshit.
The
That's
head
why
of the
Merchant is
anti-corruption
such a
unit
dog
is a
with a
lady
bone,
named Sonia
is because
Allen.
she knows she can
and she was the one that
actually-
was originally
she has a chance
in
of
the emails that I
derailing
talked about
this
earlier,
entire case.
negotiating immunity and things like that. So she's the head of that unit.
So the DA's office has their own special anti-corruption unit already in-house?
They do, and they have a director of that. Sonia Allen is the director or chief assistant. She heads that unit, and she was the one that was originally on the emails negotiating immunity and things like that. And then it switched over to, there was some issue, I believe it was with Governor Kemp, on him testifying when, all of that stuff, and Mr. Wade took over and said, I'm the only one with authority. And so Ms. Allen sort of stopped working on the case, and she hasn't really worked on the case since.
From your experience and your knowledge of Mr. Wade and Sonia Allen, does he have any special unique experience or expertise that would make him better at this anti-corruption work than the head of the anti-corruption department in the Fulton DA's office?
No, but I mean, other than, no, he would not, but Sonia Allen also hired Mr. Wade in Cobb County before this contract at, I think it was like $550 an hour or something, to investigate deaths in the Cobb County jail. So Sonia Allen was the chief, so when Neil Warren was the sheriff in Cobb County, Sonia Allen was the chief deputy. And so she basically ran the sheriff's office. They had a couple different deaths, and there were some lawsuits over access to that. A lot of the local lawyers wanted access to what was going on with the jail deaths. And Ms. Allen hired Nathan Wade to do that work, to do an investigation. And so a lot of this came out because they were ultimately sued. So I reviewed, part of what I did in this case was I reviewed all of those documents as well. Mr. Wade had to testify because one of the news organizations sued them and said that essentially Ms. Allen hired Mr. Wade to try to get around open records, to say that it was an open investigation so that they didn't have to give the jail recordings to the families about how these inmates died. Mr. Wade was a witness and had to testify, and he had billed a lot of money, which I don't have a figure, but I've got the invoices, but he had billed quite a bit of money to Cobb County, but hadn't produced any documents, and so he had to testify, and his testimony was that everything was in his brain, that he didn't have any written documents from anything. But that's where
that was some years before.
That was some years. I think it was in 2020, maybe.
So
it was right before this.
When did Miss Allen get hired by the Fulton DA's office?
When Miss Willis took office. So when Miss Willis took office was the same time that Mr. Warren, who was Miss Allen's boss, was no longer the sheriff in Cobb County. So a new sheriff was elected, Craig Owens, and so he was elected in Cobb County. He took over that office. Miss Allen no longer had a job, and she was hired by Miss Willis to head the anti-corruption unit.
Okay. So from your documents you've produced and your news stories that I've read, apparently there were other
Miss Willis
special
hired people that she knew the qualifications of once they were no longer employed by their employer.
RICO
the
cases,
scandal.
election fraud cases.
Yes, so there's several, and so that's kind of a longer answer because there's a couple different classifications. Mr. Wade was, at the time that he got this contract, he was law partners with a gentleman named Terrence Bradley and another gentleman named Chris Campbell. So it was a three lawyer firm. Both Mr. Wade and Mr. Campbell had contracts also. They actually had contracts before Mr. Wade. So they both got contracts the month that Ms. Willis took office. They got contracts to do what's called taint work, which is essentially if, for anti-corruption, because it's a lot of police brutality cases, if there's things that could be considered privilege. So let's say the police union had a lawyer doing an investigation, they subpoenaed those records, those are privileged. Somebody has to review those to see what the DA's office can actually see. So it's that wall, that privilege wall sort of. So both of Mr. Wade's law partners had contracts to do that privilege review, that taint review, conflict review.
So you're seeing if there's tainted evidence, something that should not be revealed might damage another case, or it might be privileged and not subject to disclosure?
Right, exactly. And one of the best examples I could give is, in the Tex MacGyver case, he was a lawyer. They seized a lot of his documents. A lot of them were attorney-client privilege related to other people. The DA's office was not able to just go through all of those, so they had to have a taint team, is what they call it. And so that taint team, and I don't know which cases, but the taint team involved Mr. Bradley and Mr. Campbell, who were Mr. Wade's law partners.
So basically, they're reviewing documents to see whether they should be produced or privileged by attorney-client privilege or something else.
Exactly.
Not exactly prosecuting criminal cases then.
No, they weren't prosecuting criminal cases. But Mr. Wade testified that they were law partners at the time, so that he would have shared a third of whatever contracts they got. So those contracts he was getting paid essentially from the law firm as well.
Best morning guess.
So on this case, these RICO cases that you're involved in, one of them, there are other special counsel in addition to Mr. Wade?
Yes. So there's two other, on this case particularly, there's a lady named Anna Cross and a gentleman named John Floyd. And John Floyd has worked with the DA's office for many years. I actually was involved in another RICO case year before this one, which luckily my client resolved his case, so I'm no longer involved in. But that case, John Floyd had also helped craft the indictment. And, he's sort of known as a go-to person for racketeering cases, so the district attorney would regularly call on him to help in drafting indictment. Anytime we would file what's called a demur, which is a motion to quash an indictment, he would usually be the one that came and argued it. And then Anna Cross was also hired, and she really focused on the work in federal court. And both of those sort of make sense to me because Fulton County prosecutors they're not necessarily barred in federal court. It's not something that would be required for your job. When I was a public defender in Fulton County, I wasn't barred in federal court. I had no need to. I wouldn't have paid the dues, wouldn't have done that. So, it's not something that would be required for their job, but Ms. Cross is experienced in that. So she was hired sort of as a subject matter expert to litigate some of the federal removal issues in this case.
Did those two individuals have contracts with the DA's office as well?
They have had contracts historically. They do not currently have contracts. It's very odd.
Did you review their billings?
I did. I reviewed their billings. Stark contrast. So Mr. Floyd, for example, he was only paid at a rate of $150 an hour. And
Same case.
Same case. And he
more experience and expertise in RICO cases.
I mean, everybody would agree. I think that John Floyd is one of the preeminent experts on RICO. Yeah. I believe he testified in front of the Georgia legislature when RICO was passed.
Did he have to submit itemized invoices?
He did, and his were very different. His were significantly reduced, and the big difference was he billed for the time that he was working on the case, not necessarily like 8 hours for team meetings.
Do you have itemized billings?
Very much so,
and
yes.
What increments did he bill in?
I might have some of his contracts with me, but it was either 10 or 15-minute increments, and so did Anna Cross. Now, Anna Cross was paid $250 an hour. Anna Cross is very well-known, very experienced appellate, federal lawyer, does a lot of complex litigation. She was a DA for many years, handled a lot of high-profile cases for the district attorney's office. I mean, I know her back from when, we did death penalty work in Cobb County together 15 years ago. And then she went to DeKalb County and prosecuted a number of high-profile cases there, but just very well-known. And her bills were also submitted, but they were the same rate. They were $250 an hour, but they were much lower bills, not anywhere near the bills that Mr. Wade did.
Do you know how much Anna Cross has received during the course of this criminal prosecutions or
I'm not sure.
Investigations?
I might. Let's see.
Okay. You said Mr. Wade had about $700,000 so far?
Yeah. Oh, Miss Cross was under $100,000, I believe.
All right. So if she's under $100,000, what about Mr. Floyd?
Mr. Floyd, much lower, even lower than Anna Cross. He has not billed in a while, so I did subpoena, but I also did open records for all of his bills. We've not been provided anything recently from him, so I'm not sure if he actually did bill, because his contract said you have to submit the bill within a certain amount of time. So I'm not really sure. They stopped responding to my open records requests, but when they did respond, they were very, very limited, very small bills.
Okay. And your open records request was to whom? The Fulton County government, the commission, or the DA's office?
I did them to all of them, and once especially that they stopped responding to them. So they have a portal, and if you go to the DA's office and you click open records, it takes you to the Fulton County portal. So if you try to submit it to the DA's office, it necessarily goes to a portal for the entire county. So you have to submit it through those. So that's where I would submit it. You can designate, I think this is the DA, I think this is budget, things like that. So I would be over-inclusive just to make sure that I wasn't missing somebody. But every single time they would route it to the DA's office. So I would get a response that said it's been routed to the DA's office and, we're waiting on the response. There were one or two that I got from the county that didn't appear to be routed to the DA's office.
Right. And so who's refusing to produce these records to you?
The letter came from Dexter Bonds at the DA's office.
And
Dexter
that's
Bond.
why you filed a lawsuit against the DA's office to force them to comply with open records?
Yes.
Okay, that's still pending?
It is still pending.
Fulton County Superior Court?
It's Fulton County Superior Court. It's assigned to Judge Krause, I believe, and the county attorney contacted us and says they're going to be responding. So the county attorney is actually defending that lawsuit.
Right. And so they're telling you they're going to respond to the case or respond to the request now? You're waiting to see.
I believe the case. I haven't received any documents, so.
Fairly recent filing you filed there, or that lawsuit?
Yeah, so we filed it in January, and then they had a little shutdown in Fulton County where nothing was able to be file stamped. Our process server couldn't serve it until it was file stamped, and the Odyssey, the file system in Fulton County was hacked, and so it was shut down for a while. So it took us a little bit of time to get a file stamp copy back, but it's now been served. But it was filed on January 30th.
of 2024.
Sorry.
2024. And I have a copy, which
I don't have that. If you would
who's winning
provide
this
us
thing?
with
Who's
that,
winning,
then
holy fuck?
we'll give it
I
to the
don't know.
Secretary
This
of
is a
Senate
mess.
as
A lot
a
of
supplemental
surmising, a lot of guessing,
response to
a lot
the
of
subpoena.
supposing.
I'm happy to. This is a clean copy.
A lot of weird shit.
Yes, so you all can.
So what's the relevance
this.
to you? Why did you seek these billing records of these attorneys?
I wanted to compare the different billing, the different styles of billing. Also, there had been an allegation that I was singling out Mr. Wade, and so I thought it was relevant to see the rates that the other attorneys were paid, their billing, what type of billing, if they billed for everything. Just for example, when we're in court, one of the prosecutors may be arguing, Mr. Floyd and Ms. Cross aren't there billing, but Mr. Wade is always there. So that was one thing that I noticed, and I understand now that their response is that he sort of is like a case manager almost, so I guess that would be why he's always there, but I wanted to compare them and see.
Okay. I think I want to show a couple of things. Senator Dolezal, I want to show some of the other billing records, particularly ones that showed the trips to D.C. We hadn't had but a couple of days to review all your documents, and I skimmed these records because I wanted to know exactly what was going on. You'll see highlighted down here at the bottom on November 18th of 22, interview with D.C. White House, 8 hours. Do you know what that references?
Based on another motion that was filed in our case and the arguments that were made by the DA's office, I believe that was when they met with the Department of Justice. They met with the January 6th committee. So one of the co-defendants filed a motion to try and get some documents, and the state had to respond. It was a motion to compel. I was there for it. I joined it, but I didn't litigate it. And the state said that they had to meet off campus, so because they didn't have a record of it, I guess you have to have a record if you go into the White House. And so they met with the January 6th committee off campus, and they said they had a really hard time getting that meeting, and they had to have someone who had some source or something to get them to agree to the meeting. But that's what. So the motion to compel was based on this entry, and this entry in response, they said they were meeting with the DOJ and someone with January 6th.
Okay. There's also an entry, May 23rd, 22, travel to Athens conference with, what is that, White House?
Yes, and we've tried to figure out what and who that was, because there was something happening at UGA Law School, and so we just assumed that it was someone that was there, and that's why they met there, but I don't know.
Do you have reason to suspect, or can you confirm whether or not Ms. Willis or Mr. Wade were coordinating with the Biden White House in the course of this investigation and prosecution?
The discovery, they've got, a lot of our discovery involves the January 6th. A lot of what we have in discovery is the same stuff that other places have. So they had to have gotten it from somewhere. And they also, they read a lot of the testimony. They played testimony in the special purpose grand jury. So, I don't know how they got all of that, but they got it somehow. And then, there's one of the other things I did was I did open records for the White House access, and we had records that Ms. Willis and the mayor of Atlanta were at meeting with the vice president.
Okay, and so this is the access history. How does that work? The White House keeps records of anybody that comes in and has any kind of official meeting for sure?
Oh, yes, and my understanding is it's highly regulated who can access the White House, and so you have to apply in person or apply ahead of time, and then they give you a time when you make the appointment, and they give you a time when you're allowed to be in and when you have to be out by, and they track you. That makes sense. They don't want anyone lingering in the White House, but they keep that, and so they're called WAVE records, I believe is what they're called, and I'm not sure what that's an acronym for, but they're publicly available. They're open records.
And this record that's shown on the screen shows Fonnie Willis was a visitor with the POTUS, I presume that's Vice President of the United States.
Yes, it was.
She is
And
definitely
what was the date of
like
that back in, was that February
she's a
sometime
true
in
believer. I think
23?
she must
February
have it out
28,
for Bonnie or
2023.
something. You
Is
know what
that
I mean?
before
Like
the
she seems
indictment?
very,
Yes.
very bitter about this, more so than I think she should
Any
be.
further
She seems very
explanation
passionate,
of why
whether
Ms.
I would
Willis
expect
was
her to
meeting
be
with the Vice President of the
dispassionate.
United States?
No, I know Dexter Bonds, and I believe that's the same one that Mr. I think it's Dickinson or Dixon, the mayor of Atlanta, was also there.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. We've been going at this for a while. Let's take a somewhere between 5 and 10 minute recess, and we'll be back. Thank you. We're in recess.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Good morning, everyone. My goodness gracious. My goodness gracious. Yeah, okay, so she just wished Trump well and said, "Darling, I love you, but give me Park Avenue." You know what it is that she can make a lot of money in the private sector. So her desire to serve only lasts so long as they go do shots. Ah, Kim, that's a good one. Ah. Yeah, so she made it all up. Yeah. So the thing is she can make so much more money in the private sector with speeches and sitting on boards and consulting and, all kinds of fuckery. So why would she? Because she's never been a public servant. Sorry. Sorry to burst your bubble, kids. Snickers is not your friend. Snickers is not your friend. Yeah. Anyway, I need to come up with something for us to watch. Hold on. Hold on. Cancel that. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. Oh boy. Hold on to. Hey, cat's freaking out. Let's see. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell testifying. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Bum, 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 bum. I don't even understand what's happening in this world. I'm so behind. Okay, so here's the thing that people need to understand. I am very liberal with my blocks and bans on social media, and it is for my own mental health. Not because of anything else. It's just because I don't even want to hear it. I don't want to hear your nonsense. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to. So, let's see. Is she there? Well, not really. Not really. I subscribe to all these like state Supreme Courts now, so it's like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's that? Oh, well, there's this. I don't really want to watch a CSAM hearing, but I don't know. I'm a little. This is CSAM. It's the House Judiciary Committee. Sorry.
To begin with, because child sexual abuse material is tangible evidence of sexual abuse crime, victim identification enables the rescue of a victimized child. Not only are victims removed from harmful environments, but following removal, they can be connected to the services, support, and care they need to heal and rebuild their lives. Victim identification also facilitates justice for victims. Tracing digital footprints back to producers and distributors of the images, as well as perpetrators of the abuse, ensuring that they are prosecuted and held accountable for their crimes. Federal law enforcement agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice, combat CSAM cases through targeted enforcement actions, investigative initiatives, and victim assistance programs. While these agencies work tirelessly in their investigations to track down perpetrators involved in the production and distribution of this material, they are also committed to identifying and locating victims. However, despite their best efforts, federal law enforcement agencies cannot tackle this problem alone. The collaborative efforts of federal, local, and state law enforcement agencies, along with private and nonprofit organizations, supported by federal funding and grant programs, are instrumental in identifying and rescuing victims of child sexual abuse material, as well as bringing offenders to justice and providing essential support to victims of sexual exploitation. The 61 Coordinated Internet Crimes Against Children, or ICAC, task forces across the country have been crucial to preventing, investigating, prosecuting, and developing effective responses to Internet crimes against children. Through their comprehensive efforts, the ICAC task forces, which represent over 5,400 local, state, and federal law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies, are making significant strides in identifying and rescuing victims of child sex abuse material. But the growth of the problem continues to outpace the resources available to identify and locate victims, while law enforcement, prosecutors, the tech industry, and other organizations must continually contend with the emergence of new technologies like artificial intelligence, which further complicates their efforts. Today, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, reports that the cyber tip line has received more than 92 million reports. Its child victim identification program has reviewed over 331 million images and videos, reviewing more than 25 million images annually. And while most of the children reflected in the images remain unknown, over 19,300 victims have been identified. We should certainly commend the successes of NCMEC and other law enforcement agencies in identifying and rescuing victims, but we cannot be satisfied while so many CSAM victims remain unidentified. I hope that our discussion today will focus primarily on what Congress can do to help identify more victims, with the goal of reaching all of them. During a hearing last September, which examined the threat of child exploitation in the U.S. and abroad, we heard about the various struggles of law enforcement when confronting the edict of do more with less. When considering the plight of CSAM victims, this maxim is clearly unacceptable. The collaboration between local, state, and federal law enforcement and non-governmental entities is fundamental to addressing the complex challenges posed by investigating child sexual abuse material and identifying victims. It is our duty to fully support each of these entities and to ensure that they have the resources they need to accomplish their various missions, which undoubtedly should be centered around victim identification. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I thank everyone for their opening statements, and without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. I'm going to now introduce today's witnesses, and I appreciate each of you for being here today, taking time out to come talk about this important topic. Mr. Tim Tebow. Mr. Tebow is a renowned former collegiate and professional football quarterback, having received awards such as the Heisman Trophy and being a 2023 inductee to the College Football Hall of Fame. His foundation, the Tim Tebow Foundation, works to bring faith, hope, and love to those needing a brighter day in their darkest hour of need. In addition to other efforts, his foundation works with DHS-HSI's Cybercrime Center on Operation Renewed Hope to identify previously unidentified victims of child sexual exploitation and rescue the children if possible. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Tebow. Mr. Jim Cole. Mr. Cole is the Chief of Law Enforcement Enterprise and Technology at Operation Lightshine, an organization that works to combat child exploitation and human trafficking. He's a former supervisory special agent with DHS, HSI, and served previously as the chair of the Interpol Specialist Group on Crimes Against Children. He also served as the chair of the Victim Identification Subgroup from 2016 through 2019. Thank you for being here with us, Mr. Cole. Mr. John Madsen is the board president of Raven, a nonprofit organization that works to prevent child exploitation. He also serves as the chief operating officer of Griffi, Inc., a software company focused on visual media analysis to support victim identification and other law enforcement activities. He was previously a detective with the Gainesville Police Department, served 10 years at the North Florida ICAC as Task Force Commander and served as the chair of the ICAC Emerging Technologies Working Group. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Madsen. Ms. Camille Cooper. Ms. Cooper serves as Vice President of Anti-Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation at the Tim Tebow Foundation. She has worked for over 20 years on issues including child protection, child exploitation, and child trafficking. She previously served for 13 years as the Director of Government Affairs at the National Association to Protect Children, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting children from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Ms. Cooper, thank you for being here today. Everyone, we're glad to have all the folks in the gallery as well, and we appreciate you being here for this important hearing. We're going to begin now by swearing in our witnesses. If each of you would please rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have each answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes. If you get to 5 minutes, you'll probably start hearing this. And that's what you want to hear rather than a big, massive gavel. So just so you know. But that'll be kind of that'll be a cue for you to wrap up as soon as possible after that. We're going to begin now with Mr. Tebow. Please, your 5 minutes.
Chairman Biggs, Ranking Member Nadler, Ms. Dean, honorable members of the committee, thank you guys so much for having me. Camille, Jim, John, so grateful for you guys and so honored to be here with you and humbled to be beside you. My name is Tim Tebow, and as Chairman Biggs stated, I'm fortunate to be and humbled to be the chairman and the founder of the Tim Tebow Foundation, and we exist to bring faith, hope, and love to those needing a brighter day in their darkest hour of need. To sum it up, we strive to fight for people that can't fight for themselves. Some of you may know me from sports, but honestly, more of you probably know me from getting cut from a bunch of sports teams, as Ms. Dean mentioned earlier, so thanks, Ms. Dean. We can talk about that later, it's all good. But honestly, why we're here today is to talk about the MVP. Not the MVP I chased most of my life. Couldn't get, by the way, but chased. Not the MVP most of you are probably thinking, no, not the most valuable player. A more important MVP, the most vulnerable people. That's why we're here today. A year and a half ago, this awesome lady to my left, Camille Cooper, joined our team, and I asked Camille, I said, Camille, what breaks your heart the most? And she wrote down the number 20,000. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, it's a problem. I said, what problem is that? It's the 20,000 boys and girls that have been abused and raped, and their images and videos have been captured, but nobody has been able to identify them. They're unknown. Until someone knows them, how could somebody rescue them? And I knew that day that my heart was broken and my eyes were open, and we had to do something. So I said, Camille, what do you think's the best approach? And she said, bring the best teams and players together. So we convened a meeting in Lyon, France, with amazing frontline heroes.
If he's playing around with Clay
Homeland
Clark.
Security, Interpol, Europol, NCMEC, ICMEC, ONIMI, Google, so many people and many more came to the table with really two goals. The first one, how many boys and girls are unknown, are unidentified? And it wasn't 20,000. It was over 50,000. And the second goal is how do we protect them? And that's where Operation Renewed Hope was born, led by HSI just a few miles away from here. And so many partners from around the world. And in 15 days, they were able to identify 316 boys and girls. 316
Clay
boys
Clark
and girls.
Is, the P.T. Barnum.
It was an incredible operation.
That's what Clay Clark is. He
that's
helps
a tiny dent.
Mike Flynn run the
and what we're called to get
Put
to.
America to Sleep tour.
It was amazing work, but it was so small in comparison. And so why we're here today is to be able to ask you to say yes to a bill that we're going to present. And this bill really has one goal, to build a rescue team. because there's so many frontline warriors and heroes, but there's just not enough. And we need to support them, and we need more of them to get to these 50,000 boys and girls. So this bill is strictly to create a rescue team that has the funding, the support, the training, the technology, so that they can get to these 50,000. You know, I've had the privilege of playing for a lot of sports teams in my life. And almost all of them, we've had incredible resources to give us a better chance at winning a game, something that ultimately, as much as we care about it, doesn't matter. Why would we not give as much, if not more, resources to the frontline heroes that are going after the most vulnerable boys and girls on the planet? You see, when Operation Renewed Hope identified that 316, and out of all those that were rescued, more than half of them were right here in the U.S. And when you extrapolate those numbers, that means that there's thousands of boys and girls that are starving for hope in our backyard. And we have the chance to bring hope to those that are starving for it, if we're willing. But honestly, my words will probably fall flat today. So instead of hearing from me, I would rather you hear from one of my heroes, a young girl who went through extreme abuse for 7 years, and almost every night she got raped for 7 years. And in the middle of her abuse, this is what she writes. Rescue me, help me. Monsters are chasing. Can't you see? Monsters are whispering. Can't you hear? Monsters are shouting, you're nothing. Can't you feel my pain? Monsters are pushing. End it all, just jump. Can't you hear all the whys I'm asking? Monsters are laughing. You're all alone in this. Can someone please rescue me?
I don't think...
This girl and thousands of boys and girls,
I don't know. This is
just like her,
we're not going to stay
they're
here.
calling
I'm
out
just going to warn you now.
to you and to me. And how many times in my life have I missed the call? Have I missed the mark? Unfortunately, too many.
I think he will do great in community
But would today
theater.
be a day that we wouldn't miss the mark, that we would hear her cries, that we would hear her call, and we would answer the call?
In next
Because
year's
every single
version
one of those
Our
boys
Town.
and girls is worth us answering the call and doing everything we can so that they can experience the faith, hope, and love that they deserve. Not the bondage and torture that they're in right now. I believe if we build that rescue team, we will have a chance of getting to every one of those boys and girls.
That's called law enforcement.
I got a
you
message
stupid
last night
motherfucker.
from a girl
There's
who
an
has been
entire-
rescued, and
Oh, stop.
she said, "Thank you so much for speaking up for us."
I fucking hate this guy. You don't speak
And it was
for
humbling to
anybody.
get that. But if all we do today is speak,
You're soaking in that
all I do
salary,
is
bud.
speak.
That's what you're fucking doing.
I also miss the mark. We have to do more than just talk about it. We have to act on it and be about it. Thank you for having me, and God bless.
Persona.
Thank you, Mr. Tebow. Mr. Cole, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes.
Come back. I want the board.
Good morning, Chairman Biggs, Ms. Dean, and honorable members of the committee. My name is Jim Cole, and I appear before you today as a retired supervisory special agent with Homeland Security Investigations, Chair Emeritus of the Interpol Specialist Group on Crimes Against Children, founding partner of Onimi Global Solutions, and the Chief of Law Enforcement Enterprise and Technology at Operation Lightshine, a nonprofit organization that raises funds for law enforcement agencies so they can dedicate resources to protecting our children. I extend my gratitude for Tim's passionate opening today and his unwavering commitment to these issues. As I've gotten to know Tim over the past few years, I've seen firsthand that Tim is the real deal. He puts his money where his mouth is, both literally and figuratively. I spent my 20-year career at HSI on the forefront of combating child sexual exploitation, an endeavor that has become my life's mission. I've had the opportunity to conduct several career cases, one that changed my life and career forever. That case inspired a new approach focused on victim rescue rather than solely arresting child sexual abuse material distributors. This methodology emphasizes uncovering new material and focusing on innocuous clues hidden within the vast arrays of seized multimedia content, shifting the priority to finding and safeguarding victims instead of just putting offenders in jail. I was recruited to establish HSI's victim identification program and laboratory at the HSI Cybercrime Center.
That is exactly
Some
right.
of you and your
Jay
staff
Lance.
recently visited that
Why
very
are
lab
these guys the
and
ones
saw firsthand the
investigating
incredible
a very
work that
serious,
goes on
this
in
is
it.
not the panel
It is one of
I
my
would
proudest
want
legacies.
for this topic.
One notable case that garnered
These are
national media
survivors.
attention was Operation Sunflower.
How about
After
that?
several images depicting the exploitation of a young girl were shared on
my
a darknet
God.
child exploitation
When the
site
white
found by a
people talk
Danish
about
victim
what happens to
identification
other
specialist
people.
overseas, we began an urgent effort to identify and safeguard her.
Got a couple
One of the
committee
images
members
depicted the
on
young
way
victim
back.
in the back seat of a car with a blurry highway sign out through the window. This sign, we determined, was in Kansas, starting with a 2 and running east and west. Around hay bale, a hedgerow, and a tree near the sign made it unique. With this information, we set out across Kansas, driving down every highway, starting with a 2 and running east and west, looking for that sign. On the second day of the search, I just happened to be with the agent from Kansas City. We drove down Highway 20, and we found that sign. It came into focus as we neared the highway's end, and as we got closer, I could see the hay bale, the hedgerow, the tree. This discovery expedited the 11-year-old victim's identification and rescue from ongoing abuse that very day. From the discovery of the CSAM on the darknet to the child's rescue, only 13 days had elapsed. During my 7 years running the program and lab, I had 4 personnel conducting victim
We were
identification.
reviewing the
It's not
billing
near enough.
practices, the
As Tim stated
contracts
earlier,
that
there are
various
tens of
outside
thousands of
counsel have.
unsolved series, unidentified
And
victims
I
out there
pulled
who
up
are
here
waiting on us to safeguard them.
One
There's already an
section
incredible
of
and
Mr.
successful
Wade's
blueprint
bill
to
for the-
increase victim identification personnel within
early
HSI
on.
and support our nation's military veterans at the same time.
Stop.
We need to look
Stop. Oops.
in his bill. I see on November 5th,
Sorry, y'all.
prepare case for pretrial, 24 hours
That's that.
on one day.
Whoopsie.
What do you make of that?
I mean, I thought it was astonishing that, you know, you didn't sleep for 24 hours. I've been to trial. I'm sorry. I've been to trial and had to work long hours, but 24 straight. But we did question him about that at the hearing, and he said that that's when it was concluded. So how he explained it was November 5th is when the work was concluded. And so he had done that work up until then, and that he only billed when it was concluded. So he said that the 24 hours, who knows when it spanned, but that how he billed was
Would have had to
concluded.
be between November 3rd and November 5th, though, right? So it had to be on the 4th and the 5th, 12 hours a day?
It had to
At
be.
least.
And, you know, the other thing that I noticed with this is prepared cases for pretrial. At this point, it says anti-corruption unit. His 2 law partners are the conflict lawyers for the anti-corruption unit. So you've got it's like my husband couldn't represent someone who's adverse to me. Like, my husband is my law partner. He can't be doing privilege review on a case I'm prosecuting. So he's consulting on anti-corruption cases for the DA's office, where his 2 law partners are doing the privilege review at the same time. That plus the 24 hours are the 2 things that really struck out to me.
So, but the only role he had was this prosecution of this election fraud?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the only role.
Okay, so when it says anti-corruption, that's the corruption, we're looking at election interference?
Yes, he's never worked on any other case.
All right. Let's see that other bill there, Senator Dolezal. All right, so here's another one, if you can see that okay. This is the one we put up earlier. It looks to be much more specific date-wise anyway than just, you know, those 24-hour chunks like that. Okay.
Right. I mean, it's more specific, but it doesn't say what, you know, like, just for example, team meeting and argument prep. Argument prep for what? I mean, normally when we do bills, we would say, you know, argue motion to dismiss or argue whatever the motion is. Research, what are you researching? Researching statutory privilege, you know, whatever it is.
And now this one, he shows date ranges when it's over multiple days. Like down at the bottom, 4/26 to 4/27, 18 hours.
Right.
If I'm reading that right, or 16 hours. But on that previous one, he just has one date, 24 hours.
Yes.
Okay.
And
And
how
you
he-
say these are approved by Fonnie Willis. By contract, she has to approve these billings.
Yes, she does.
Okay.
And those are approved by her. So if there were any questions, you know, and as a lawyer, when we submit bills to clients, they regularly question, you know, and I know when I've done appointed work, they regularly question that as well. You have to list exactly what you're in court for, exactly what you're drafting. You can't just say prepared cases. You've got to say What did you prepare? What did you draft? So, I mean, the county, in Cobb County, for example, they make you actually attach motions. If you do like an appeal or something and you're billing for that, you have to actually attach it to prove that you did the work.
Paul.
I did go back at the break, though,
Sorta.
and I haven't
No
answered one of
problem,
your
Paul.
questions
We'll
earlier.
take any
Just
part
wanted
of
to
you
clear
that
up. You had
shows up.
asked me,
No worries.
when the special purpose grand jury had convened. I looked, the state filed a response. So this is DA Willis's response that was filed on February 2nd. They wrote on
This response to your motion to disqualify?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Response to my motion. On page 13, they wrote, shortly after his appointment in January 2022,
we're kicking
District
this
Attorney
dead horse.
Willis
This
petitioned
horse
the Chief
hasn't
Judge
died
of the
enough.
Superior Court
So this
to
is the
convene the
Senate
Superior Court judges
committee
to
in
consider her request
Georgia.
for the special purpose grand jury, to
And
conduct an investigation
yeah,
into the
this
facts and
mutilated
circumstances
cow.
relating directly or
Anyway,
indirectly
so,
to the
yeah,
possible
we're still
attempts to
arguing
disrupt
this, and
the
now we're
lawful
doing
administration of
HR
the
stuff.
2020 elections of the state of Georgia.
Yep,
And they attached
that's
that
where we
exhibit.
landed.
So you had asked me
HR.
earlier when she petitioned. So it was, in their own words, shortly after his appointment.
Okay. So this whole, the cases are about attempts to disrupt, because obviously Georgia certified Biden as the winner, and he got inaugurated, that following January, and this is years later we're having this whole investigation.
Yes, attempts. And my client specifically is charged with attempt and conspiracy. So he's not charged with actually doing a specific act. He's charged with conspiring or attempt, depending on which section you're talking about in the charges.
Some of these itemized statements show drafting.
Yes.
Did Mr. Wade draft any documents to your knowledge, or
No.
prepare any legal documents at all?
No, not that I'm aware of. And that
Did
would
he
be...
sign any pleadings as if he was the drafting attorney?
No, and he's not the one that usually files them. Will Wooten is the one that usually does the filing. There's two other prosecutors
this
that
is
also do
basically
it.
Carol from
Alex,
HR,
and I don't want to
Kim.
butcher his
We
last
know
name. Starts
these
with a B.
people.
But he does it,
We've
and then
worked
Grant
in
Rude.
HR. We know who these
Anna
people
Cross
are.
has also filed pleadings, but
The whiny
not Mr.
the
Wade.
whiny
In
coworker?
your
No, I don't
review of
know.
all of his billings, did you ever see where any of his time or bills were cut or reduced by whoever was reviewing them and approving them, either Ms. Willis
She's
or her
terrible.
deputy?
I'm sorry. And
No,
I have
never
a
saw any
grating voice
questions.
sometimes
And
too.
It,
So
her
I
response,
I feel
or
it.
their office's response doesn't indicate
Mr.
that
Phone
was done either.
Diddler.
And your
That wasn't
experience
his
when
phone.
you were doing, like your public defender work,
Mm-hmm.
that you were reviewed and they cut your time?
Oh my gosh, yes.
to
Yeah,
take
when
a
I
massive-
first left the public defender, I had a couple clients that were in the appeal process, because I was at that point I was in the appeals division when I left, and I didn't want their cases to linger, and I didn't want a new lawyer to have to kind of just pick up right when they were going to the appellate courts. So I kept some of them. Some of them
realized
the
his
judges
junk
appointed
was
me, and so
heavily
I would be
featured in
paid
that shot
just
for
$50 an
something.
hour, $45 an hour, something like that. And then some I just took pro bono, but I had to get those bills approved. I mean, and they were regularly cut.
On Mr. Wade's contract, he was allowed to bill, he was capped, he could not bill more than $35,000 in any given month.
Hello,
Yes,
Max.
and that was
That's
not,
it.
so the
Husband
original
and wife
contract
team?
before the special
Okay.
purpose grand jury was started was a lower cap.
shit where you
This was the
work.
cap for the
Hello.
majority of his work
Or
during
no,
the
wait,
special
don't
purpose
shit where
grand
you
jury
sleep.
and then
I
now.
don't get it.
So he had a contract November 1st, 2021 up until October 31st, 2021. And the cap was lower for that. Then there was a period of, I think it's 15 or 16 days where he did not have a contract. Which also happened to be one of the times they were out of town. But so they re-upped the contract November 15th, and then it had a cap.
which-
but the
which
cap was
senator was
significantly
she,
higher.
an
I
escort
don't
for?
remember
No,
the
I'm
first
kidding.
cap.
We don't
but it was
know
not
that.
35,000.
We're making a Boper joke.
Here's a document you produced. I think you prepared this summary that shows all the payments that he received.
Either I did this, or this might have come from Fulton County Purchasing.
All right.
Okay.
So that was produced to you from Fulton County as
Yes.
all the payments he received?
Yes, this was produced from Fulton County. Yes.
And what's the total? Is that just, my eyes aren't so good. That looks like 22 all the way through 23.
Yes, 22 through 23. So, and
That sounds
so his first
good,
bill
Kim.
would have been
Aw.
paid in January
Have
of 2022.
fun.
So he billed for time in November, December, and then you see those two bills. And so those were $15,000. I believe that was the cap. So in January he was paid for $15,000 for work in November, and then in December he had work totaling $15,000, and he was paid for both of those in January.
That's why there's those top 2 invoices for $15,000.
Yes, that's why there's those top 2 invoices. And they produced some other documents to me as well that showed which funds they came out of. So I was able to track which ones came from state seizure money and then which ones came from county general fund.
And that was all before this grand jury was even approved.
The grand jury was not approved until June of 2022.
Okay, it was requested in January.
It was, and I just looked that up at the break. So it was requested in January. It was approved in June. The order, actually. But what happened was they started picking, so it looks like they started picking the grand jurors on May 2nd of 2022, and they actually started hearing evidence June 1st of 2022.
Okay, so lots of this time was way before he would have been having to question any witnesses or attend grand jury hearings or anything.
Yes, he could not have attended a grand jury hearing until at the earliest May 2nd.
You were talking about the experience and expertise of the 3 outside, I'm gonna call them outside counsel, because they were not direct employees of the DA's office.
Correct.
Had Mr. Wade ever tried a felony case, prosecuted a felony case before this, to your knowledge?
No, that he has never prosecuted a felony case. And I asked his law partner that, who had been his law partner for some time, that he had never prosecuted that. I also did some independent research in the metro areas where I knew that he had worked in Cobb County, so I looked to see if he had ever been filed as a prosecutor in Cobb County for felonies, and he was actually just a solicitor, and solicitors is, because you'd said not everybody may understand the difference between solicitors and district attorneys.
We've got an ex-solicitor on this panel, so don't say anything negative about him.
So he can tell you all about it.
They prosecute misdemeanors only, right?
Yes, and in
Okay.
Cobb County specifically, they prosecute misdemeanors, yes.
Okay. It looks like he's pretty much hitting the maximum that he was allowed to under his contract?
Yes, most months he did.
Okay. And this is through that block billing that was not specifically itemized exactly what he was doing or how much time on each task?
Always block billed.
Okay.
He never itemized bills, never was specific.
What were the caps for the other 2 special counsel? Were they also limited? I assume you've received their contracts, or did they have a written contract?
They did. So they had written contracts, and I do have those, and they did have caps. They were significantly lower than Mr. Wade's. They do not currently have contracts, and I just found that out at a hearing because we had asked for that. We had asked for it in open records, and then I had subpoenaed it as well. Pretty much every subpoena I filed for the hearing, the state filed a motion to quash, including this one, and Ms. Cross was at the hearing, and she said, I can just tell you right now I don't have a contract. So I had thought, I was under the impression that they just weren't giving me that contract. I had no idea that they just didn't have one. So apparently right now, Mr. Floyd and Ms. Cross don't have contracts.
Do you think that was intentional so that they don't have to disclose how much they're earning?
I think it was sloppy.
Okay. Does Mr. Wade have a current contract?
Yes, he does. I also think it may have been, I don't know if it's disclosure, but I can tell you that they've changed since I started looking at this. They've changed what they put on the public documents. I used to be able to go to Open Checkbook and see every time he would get a check, and since I filed this, none of them have come up. So I don't know if he's not being paid anymore or if he hasn't filed any invoices, but the invoices are due, I believe, 30 days after. So, they regularly came up, but now all of a sudden they don't.
Okay. So eventually you sought to disqualify Ms. Willis from serving as counsel and prosecuting Mr. Roman's case.
I did.
Okay. Can you pull up that motion? That motion was filed here in January, I think it was January 8th of 2024.
Yes.
What was your motion to disqualify based on?
It was based on a number of things, but it was based on mostly the fact that Miss Willis and Mr. Wade had a romantic relationship, and they had been traveling, and he had been paying for a lot of that travel. So there were a couple different things. She had not followed the statute. So the statute I referenced earlier, 15-18-20,
Right, Max?
said that you had to have county approval. She didn't have that. So that was one thing. There were also...
You had figured that out through your financial records?
Yes, I had figured that out through my financial records, through open records,
right, Max?
through
I don't
reviewing all the
even
Board of County
understand that.
Commissioners. And I actually, to that motion, I attached, just on this issue,
I mean, I think
actually
this is an
attached a
HR
document
issue. Don't get
showing
me
how
wrong.
independent
There's,
special
like,
counsel
sloppy
would normally
HR
be
issues,
appointed, or,
but
sorry, special counsel.
it doesn't change the fact.
Because I found one where, and I think it's exhibit, let's see. It's Exhibit J. I found one where Fulton County had actually been asked to approve a line item for an independent contractor agreement. And so this, I used it as an example of what normally would happen.
Was that for an attorney?
It was for an attorney.
So she's saying in pleadings now that she's not required to get county approval, but in the past, for people other than Wade, she had gotten approval?
This is actually the county attorney. So
Okay.
this document is the county attorney. I do not believe she's ever gotten approval for anybody. And her filing said she's doesn't. I mean, her filing, I at the break I was looking at it. I mean, she said that that I incorrectly contend that the appointment exercised by, and in parentheses, a state constitutional officer must be followed by an approval of the local government's board of commissioners. And she says over and over again that I'm just wrong, that she doesn't have to because she's a state constitutional officer. So that was their position, that she doesn't have to.
So is that one of the grounds for your motion to disqualify these, let's just call them financial irregularities, that she had not complied with the state law or county policy of getting prior approval?
Yes, that was one of the primary bases. But then I also reviewed case law and saw, the conflict of interest. And, our motion, the theory, basically just to sum up the motion, is that essentially he's getting paid all of this money and they're not going through the proper procedures. And I go through it in the motion. I talk about how he didn't file an oath, which is rare. I'm one of those.
Didn't file a what?
He didn't file an oath of office. Yeah. And I'm one of those people that I always, when I first start a case, I always make sure that everything is all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So I always pull that. Anytime I've only ever had special counsel twice, and it's been people who were not paid, who were district attorneys in other jurisdictions who took the case on, which is the normal process in the state. But I've always pulled that just to see that they're sworn. That's something that's important to me. And I couldn't find it, so I did open records to the probate court, to the Superior Court, and there was no oath of office filed.
Sworn for the special assistant district attorney?
Yes. If you're going to be inside of a grand juries are highly regulated. I can't just go in a grand jury. None of us can just go into a grand jury. So you have to be a sworn officer of the state to actually be in there, particularly to present evidence. And so I wanted to see if he had taken an oath. And that's something that you would file. It should be publicly available.
Here's
not
the other
something
thing.
That's really,
so I just heard something that I thought was very interesting that she said.
So, once I learned that, I was like, why?
One of the things she said is that she started this based on
public approval of these
her not getting
There's no
prior
oath of office
approval
filed.
for the
This is
expenditures.
different. What's going
Then
on?
she
We
turned to the
later found out
conflict
that
of
he had
interest.
taken an oath, but nobody had filed
So
it.
she just gave
And
us
law
the
requires- there's a
insight
statute that
of
requires you to
her
actually file it.
I
little
have looked at
strategy
that. So
here.
the statute for
She's digging,
a
which
district
I don't,
attorney,
I
their
get it,
oath,
but I
when
just
they're
want to call a
sworn in
thing a
that
thing.
position says, I do
Okay?
swear
That's
that
what
I
I
will
wanna do.
faithfully and impartially and without fear, favor, or affection discharge my
Please,
duties as
Mr. Wrinkle,
district attorney
call Zach.
and will only take my
It's
lawful
okay.
compensation.
We knew what you mean.
So help me God. Did Ms. Willis sign her oath that swore she would not take any unlawful compensation?
Yes, she did that, and then she also filed some disclosure forms that are required. There's financial disclosure forms that Fulton County requires that you file every year, and you have to disclose if you've received any gift over $100. So from anybody doing business with the county. And Fulton County is I used to be a Fulton County employee. They are very strict on those types of things. So anytime there's anything that could be construed as a gift over $100. And I've gone to lunch with prosecutors before who wouldn't let me pay for lunch because they're like, what if it's over $100, So people do take that pretty seriously.
So that would apply to Ms. Willis would not be allowed to receive gifts from whom?
From anybody who was, and I actually believe I attached it as an exhibit. It's basically anybody who is doing business or
She is
seeking to do
highly
business with Fulton
unlikable.
County.
Highly
It's one of
That would
those.
include Mr. Wade, obviously, then?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
And that makes sense because that's one of those provisions that's supposed to be guarding against honest services.
Like anti-kickback statute.
That's exactly what
Hire
it's based on.
somebody as a vendor and they give you gifts in exchange.
Yes, and so they require that you disclose that every year. It's signed under oath. You have to file it with Fulton County.
So how'd you learn about this relationship between Mr. Wade? I think this has been acknowledged now by both parties, correct?
It has, yes.
It's a dispute as to when it began, but it's acknowledged that they had or I don't know if they still do, but at least had a romantic relationship.
Yes, that's
How'd
not.
you figure that out? How'd you find out?
So at first, I knew Mr. Wade and I knew Miss Willis, and a lot of people in the community were a little surprised to see Nathan, Mr. Wade handling this case. It was just, a lot of people said that, and so a lot of people were talking about that, and it was kind of surprising, because it's not really, he does a lot of law practice, but this isn't what you would imagine him doing.
Did you ever see him have other billings? I mean, how do he have time to represent anybody else when he's billing, 24 hours a day to Fulton County?
He had other people working for him. Like, he had a law student working for him for a while, and then he had a first-year associate. So I'm assuming that they would probably do whatever other work he had.
Did you ever look at his calendar? Did you have access to that to see if
No.
it matched up?
No, I didn't have access to his calendar, and I didn't have access to their like text messages. I mean, I was able to get get his geolocation data through subpoena, but the one thing that really struck me is if I was accused of something and I was saying I didn't do it, I would download my phone. They have a system. It's called Celebrate, and Fulton County pays for it. City of Atlanta pays for it. It's literally a system that you can hook your phone into. I have an investigator that has it, and I have my clients do it all the time. You hook your phone up, and it can find deleted text. It can find everything.
I think she is going to
and you can
run for
limit it. You can
district
say,
attorney.
I only want texts with this person.
Deidre.
So if I was being accused of having an affair with someone,
it's a small,
and I
it's
said
a
it didn't
small
start until
state.
April, and someone else said
And
it started
Southern
in October,
politics and
the easiest thing to do
relationships
is
are fraught
download
with
that phone.
drama. Ha ha
And
ha.
for privacy concerns, you can file it under seal, but you could easily
Yeah, I
narrow
don't
it down
think
and say, I want this
I don't
timeline.
think
I want
that's
all of
far
our
off. I don't
texts
know.
from,
Very
November
frantic.
2021, and
I
it
can't
would easily
stand-
tell
can't
whether or
stand
not
the
they were romantic in
franticness.
nature.
Before I
Right?
leave
Like, stop
the
panicking.
billing issues,
I
did you
know
ever
she
compare
feels like she's got
Floyd and
something.
Cross's bills
Oh,
to
good for
Wade's
you,
to see if
Paul.
they
I'm
were
sorry
billing
you
a
feel
meeting
like-
together, like there was that meeting
You're-
with
you're a month
teams?
from
Or what?
now.
Were they billing for the
Hey,
same
let's see,
meetings as well?
Wednesday?
So I looked at that. One thing is we don't have most of Floyd's. So Floyd has not billed in quite some time. So I didn't have his to compare, but I did look at Anna Cross's. The one day that I remember looking at was when they were in federal court to see, because so Miss Cross was the one actually litigating in federal court. But Mr. Wade was sitting there with them at council table, and they both billed for that. I wanted to see if he billed for time that he was sitting in court waiting, because I know in Cobb County, for example, with appointed work, if we're sitting in court waiting, we can't bill unless we're actually doing something. Like, they won't pay for two people to sit there. And so I wanted to look at that. But they were both there in court that day.
What about the teams meeting where he billed for? Were either of them involved in that team, since they're also outside special counsel?
No, they were not. So all of those people were people who would not have itemized that.
Okay.
Employees.
All right, back to your uncovering the
Okay.
relationship.
Yes,
How did
yeah.
you figure it out?
So Terrence Bradley was Nathan Wade's law partner originally, and he was also his lawyer in the divorce. I did not at the time know that they had filed for divorce. I knew Nathan's wife. I knew both of them historically from Cobb County. I mean, they're, people knew them in Cobb County. Mr. Bradley actually called me after an article. We were looking into the financial irregularities. We're looking into how much money had been paid, because everybody in the case was kind of like, why do you have special
this
counsel?
case?
On this case, yeah. Like,
Was
why
Bradley still a partner with Wade at that time?
He was not. There was testimony that their partnership ended in summer of 2023. So it had just ended, is my understanding. And it's kind of unclear like what month. The testimony is very unclear as to when they actually. I have when they dissolved. I think it was September, but it's very unclear as to their partnership. And I will say their partnership was a loose partnership. They had a partnership with the bar, but they all had separate legal entities. So each of them were filed as the law office of Terrence Bradley, law office of Nathan Wade. They had some joint bank accounts, but then they had some separate bank accounts. So I don't really know the exact structure. It was a very loose type of organization. But they were working together. And so Terrence actually called me. He had seen an article where I had done open records with another lawyer, Manny Aurora, and we had uncovered how much money everybody had made. The news had gotten wind of that, and I later learned that the news had open records to get all of my open records. So every time I would get something, the news would get it, because I wondered how that happened. But so that somebody published that, and I had done some more open records. And Miss Willis actually called Mr. Bradley when I did these open records and said, they're looking into us. And he called me because he was worried about it. And so we had a conversation, and he actually asked me, do I need a lawyer? what's going on? What are you investigating? What's the parameters of this? And we had a conversation, and I said, well, my interests are different than yours. I represent Mr. Roman, so I can't advise you. That would be a conflict. He asked if John, my husband, could, and I said, no, that's a conflict too. If you feel like you need somebody, you need to talk to someone else. At the time, that was early in September. I had court in Cobb County, and I ran into Mr. Bradley. I was in Judge Harris's courtroom. I think it was either September 11th or 13th. I checked my calendar a week or so ago, but it was one of those dates. And I was taking a plea in front of Judge Harris, and Mr. Bradley was also there. Another lawyer who ultimately represented Mr. Bradley at our hearing, B.C. Chopra, he was there in court also. And then a friend of all of ours, who's a district attorney, his name is Burt Cohen, he was taking the plea with me. And Burt and I have known each other for a long time. Terrence, BC, everybody's known each other for a long time. We were all sitting in a conference room attached to that courtroom, waiting for the pleas, chit-chatting, took the plea, went back in, and Mr. Bradley essentially went through the whole thing and said, well, this is what's really happening. I had a notepad, and I took notes on all the things to ask for open records.
So what did he say was really happening when he said this is what's happening?
He said that they met at a judicial conference before. He was very specific that it was before she became DA, because that was one of the things that he couldn't remember when the judicial conference was, but he knew that it was before she became DA.
When did she become DA?
She became DA in, it would have been January 2021.
Okay.
So she became DA January 1st, 2021, but she had a transition team leading up to that. So, and Mr. Wade was in charge of her transition team. So Mr. Bradley told me all of that. We met for about an hour. Said that they had been together. They met at this conference. Nathan was still married, and Mr. Bradley was upset because of what happened in the divorce. He was upset because they were still married, the Wades were still married, and he essentially just left her after meeting Miss Willis and dropping the kids off at college. So.
And Bradley was Wade's attorney in that divorce action you're talking about? Okay.
Yes, I didn't know that at the time.
But they were law partners.
They had been,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And I actually don't
Meanwhile,
know if
that
he was
was
still
straight
his
up
attorney when he
vodka
talked to
she
me.
was
I don't
chugging.
know if he was or not.
I
Because
just looked
at
him
some
up.
point,
I
Mr.
like
Wade
him. I want to
represented
find
himself,
out, like,
and he
what's
hired a
his,
different lawyer. So I
what's
didn't know
his,
anything about the divorce at that time.
what's his,
So
like,
Bradley did not like the way Wade had treated his wife.
He did not.
message, I guess.
But he
did not.
represented
I'm
her.
He did
interested.
not like the
Okay.
way he had treated his wife. He didn't like what was happening in the divorce proceeding, yes.
Okay.
And I mean, I remember specifically him saying, I handle my business,
And,
things
like,
like that.
how
like,
is he being
that I don't
accepted
leave
in,
my
like,
wife without
hip-hop
alimony.
circles,
Because
and
this,
is
and we
he-
talked
you know
about it.
what
I
I mean?
mean,
Like,
Miss
I
Wade
worry
had
about, like,
been a stay-at-home mom for,
appropriative and
they'd
all
been
that
married almost
stuff,
30
like,
years. And
there's a way to
literally
do
it
it
was
that
right
is
after they dropped
honoring
their,
of the
their youngest off
genre.
at college that he said,
And I wonder if he's
move out,
approaching it and being accepted
and
in
so
that way. So
we went
anyway,
through,
just
I was
curious.
obviously interested in, wait, what's happening? Walk me through this. And so he was telling me about the access cards, that Mr. Wade had access cards, telling me about the contracts, told me about their contract, that they had that Nathan had brought them the contract for the first appearance hearings. They had a contract for that. We didn't talk about that yet. That they had the contract for the taint work, and then ultimately that Nathan was hired as the attorney on this case. That they had been dating before, and he told me, they met at hotels. He would go to her place. And I remember him saying, you need to find her bestie who they had a falling out. That's the person whose condo it was that they would meet at. And
did you later determine who that bestie was?
Yes, it was Robin Yeardy.
Right.
It was not until sometime
Right,
later that I
Pepper?
determined that. It was
bullshit.
very difficult to determine who
tired
that
of- I
was
don't
because
want
he
to
did not
know
remember
about
her name. And
reaction
But
to
he
folks
knew
who
her
are
by
loving him across
sight.
the board.
He
That's
did.
Did he
fantastic.
later confirm to you or
That's so
identify
great, Paul.
who she
I can't-
was?
yes,
I'm so interested to
I
listen.
had sent him a couple
just
pictures
listened to a
or
little
showed him a couple
bit of
pictures
one
of some
song
other
that
folks
sounded
or
This
really
was
names.
in
good.
January of 24, right
Yes.
before your
But
motion.
It was. It
Pepper,
may have even been after I filed the motion. It was around the
I'm
time. It
done
was either
with this
before or
fucking
around the
gossip.
time, but it was in
I'm
January.
done. I wanna get to the
I had
case
gotten
at
some
hand.
open records requests
I want to get to
from
what matters.
the DA's
And-
office.
and not
They
that
had
ethics
a
don't matter.
contract.
They definitely matter. But this is
Yep.
an HR
We just put on
issue.
screen
There it is.
some of the
Perfect.
text messages
This
that
is an
you
HR issue.
produced
This
to
is
us.
not
Yes.
This is from your phone.
a
It
deal
is, and
breaker.
so
You're
the-
talking to
Period.
Terrence Bradley, I see over there on the
Period.
left.
Yes, and so when you see on the 14th that one that's right in the middle that says file attachment with MIME type, that
Yes.
is a picture of her. So it doesn't show up on this, but it's actually, there's a picture of
So
Miss
while
Yeardy.
you're texting, you're shooting him a picture to see if he can identify Robin Yeardy?
Yes, yes.
Did he
And
identify her?
he did, yes. He said, yes, that's her, that's the East Point. He thought the
don't
apartment was in
know
East
if
Point.
she's
I
under
later found out
oath.
it was in Hapeville, but
I
those are
don't know if
very
she's under
close
oath.
in-
I think that
close
this
areas.
is a
So he knew
Senate
they would meet
hearing,
at that
so I have a
apartment?
He
feeling
did,
that,
yes.
in
He knew
my
all about it.
experience, some of these Senate
And it was
committees
hard to
don't
find Miss
tend to
Yeardy.
put
What happened, and she was Robin
their
Bryant, and then she got married. Miss
witnesses
Yeardy.
under
I did an
oath,
open
so
records request
I don't know.
for a
Good
contract
question.
that the
Very
DA's
good
office
question.
got. It's called critical mention. They, she has a, I guess he's like, he's
Oh
an
my God,
attorney, but
thank
he's
God,
sort of in
Paul.
charge of communications. His name is Jeff DeSantis.
He looks great. I
Right
can't
after
wait to
Ms. Willis
listen.
had opened
I
the
love it.
investigation
Thank
in
you
this
for
case,
sharing that.
that same week, he contracted a company called Critical Mention, which is a media monitoring company. They put a dollar figure basically on your media presence, and they give you these analytical reports. And they say, you know, hey, you did great on MSNBC. That's $1 million worth of, you know, stuff for your brand. The Fonnie Willis brand is doing well, or you know, this phrase is doing well, things like that.
She had an employee in her office that was responsible for promoting her image, her publicity.
She had a publicly funded contract for this. So Jeff DeSantis contracted or called this company, and it's in the emails. I think I provided those as well, but contacted Critical Mention and said, we need to hire you to do media monitoring. And it was the same week that she had sent the letter to Raffensperger and Kemp about this case. Said, we need to have a contract to do media monitoring. Got $10,000 approved, paid $10,000 for a year contract for an annual contract.
Who approved that?
Jeff DeSantis' email said the county approved it, and his emails indicated that it was hard to get approved, that
and
he
I
had to
love
really
his
push,
look,
I think is what
Paul.
he said.
Of
There's some
course.
language to that,
I'm
but
a
the
big
county paid
Sam
for it.
Elliott
Do
fan,
other
if you
DAs
don't
do
know.
I've never
So
even
he's
heard of
got
media
the
monitoring. I
look.
didn't even know it
Yeah.
existed.
I like that look,
No,
so.
no. I was.
Yeah, I
it was
love
very
it.
shocking. But so I got some of the emails about this media monitoring. So I did open records, and again, once I got them, they shut me down and wouldn't give me anything else. But so these emails have attachments, they're PDFs, and you can see in the emails the hyperlink to them where you can actually see the analytical reports. That's what I wanted to get, and obviously nobody would give those to me. But these emails showed a trail where two people in her office, so Miss Willis, Mr. DeSantis, and then Robin Yeardy, were the ones that had access to this critical mention profile. It's like it's a platform that you can log into and see, you know, how am I doing in the media.
What was Robin Yeardy's role in the DA's office?
She was a liaison between the news organizations. So she said that, like, when CNN, MSNBC wanted her on, they would call Robin and she would coordinate it. She would do her hair and makeup, and then she would coordinate her interviews. But so how I found Robin was I'm going through these emails, and all of a sudden I see an email from Mr. DeSantis saying, take Robin off of this account. She's no longer with the office.
Okay,
and I was
let
like,
me
oh,
tell you
I wonder if
something,
that's her. And
okay?
so I found a
Can I
picture
tell
of her
you
and I asked
something?
Terrence, is that her?
This is how
because
they
I found out
defame
she'd been
women.
fired, or been
This
let
is
go
how
or
they
quit or
defame
whatever it
women.
was. And so
Something
that's
that
how I
would
was
be
able to figure
normal,
out who Robin
normal
Yeardy
in
was. Then we were
any
able to run her,
corporation,
run
any-
her
anywhere,
information, get
anywhere.
an address.
Any DA's
and
office
that's
where
how
it
we
might
were
be
able
a
to narrow
man
down
running
where
it.
this Hapeville condo was.
You know.
Okay, so that's
So this
where,
is about defaming a woman.
basically Miss Willis and Mr. Wade would
And
meet.
in this case,
for their,
a black woman.
relationship.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But
I
Mr.
don't
Bradley told
know,
me
but
at that
this
first meeting that
really
they would meet at
smells
hotels.
like
He
a
told me about a lot of
racist,
travel. I mean, he
misogynistic
detailed,
kind of
you know,
fuckery.
he detailed a lot of stuff. He said that they
From a
traveled to
bitter
Texas, they traveled to
chick.
Florida.
Couldn't make it.
Just,
and
you know, a
didn't
lot
get
of different
picked.
travel. He said Belize. He specifically said
So
Belize,
pick
a
me,
cruise,
Mary over here.
the Bahamas, you know,
with her
things like that.
And you were later
72
able to
inch pearls.
verify that through other subpoenas or open records
Is
requests or
going to make
whatever?
everybody's
Yes,
life
I was. I was
miserable
able
because of
to.
it.
I subpoenaed bank records. I subpoenaed credit card records, and then
That's
I actually
what
subpoenaed
she's
the
here
travel
for,
agencies
to
that Mr.
make
Wade
it
used for some of those
impossible
trips.
for us to
he
get
used two of the
justice.
cruises that they took. He used a travel agency. So there was a cruise to the Bahamas. I got through a travel agency. There was a trip to Aruba that I got
know.
through the
I
travel agency,
I
and then
can't
there was
tell you
another
the
cruise.
respect I have for
I
Fonnie
think that
Willis.
one's to the Bahamas also that I got through a
I've
different
said it
travel
from the
agency.
beginning,
And then
and
his
it's
credit
only
cards are the ones that showed all the Belize
over
trips.
time.
And they showed that he was buying the tickets for both himself and Miss Willis.
Oh yes, the credit
You
card
already
statements.
went
So
through it.
because I guess he used
There
a travel
was an
travel
entire-
agency,
God, there
his
were
credit
days
card
of
statements actually had
testimony
her
about
name and
this.
seat number and all that on it.
Days.
Okay.
So, I mean, there was no disputing.
Made clear it was paid for by him on his credit cards.
Yes.
And then
Oh,
she
yes.
paid
This
him
the
back.
document you gave us from Capital One there.
It is,
Why do
yes.
you
And there you can see,
lie?
so Clara Bowman is Mr.
Why
Wade's
did we-
mom. So this trip, this was the cruise that happened.
I'm not even.
October
Why did we
31st,
let this
around that
happen?
date.
How did we
Mr.
get
Wade
here,
paid
people?
for Miss Willis,
How
Mr.
did we
Wade,
get
and
here?
then his mother's plane
How did we
tickets,
get
and
here?
then also their cruise.
How did we
overseas.
get
I
to
think that
this
one was
point
Royal
where the
So
twisting
your
of
summary
truth,
here showing
the
trips,
twisting of facts
know
to suit a narrative
late
becomes the
October,
norm?
they
How
took a
did we
cruise
get
to the
here?
Bahamas, and
How did we
this
get
is
here?
from his financial records. He paid for
How
this
did we
for
get
both,
here?
tickets.
Yeah,
Is
this
it not
from his
okay
financial
for
records, and I tried to be,
a woman
you know,
and
there
a
were lot of
man to
Ubers and
date?
things like that.
I
did
get
not
it.
include
Again,
things
it
like
could
that,
be an
but I, you know,
ethics
I wasn't
violation.
positive. I wanted to be under-inclusive, not
I don't know
over-inclusive.
what the policies of that department
And then
are.
you
I
showed a
imagine
trip
they
to
include
Aruba,
some
another one to
policies
Bahamas,
around
one to Belize, one to Napa
fraternization,
Valley.
if you
Yes.
will.
These are all from October 22 up to
So, to the
May of
point where
23.
that might
Yes.
be an issue,
This is a document
and
you
there
furnished
was
us.
misconduct
Summary, is this
and
something
favoritism,
prepared?
No, it's a summary.
then absolutely, you should really.
And so you
That should
discovered
be
that
an
and
ethics
verified
issue.
its
That's
accuracy
internal.
through
That's
these,
internal
credit
to
card
to the DA's
receipts,
office
etc.
and
Yes.
the whoever oversees. What is
You were
that?
able
The
to
Attorney
deny
General.
these trips occurred?
No.
To
I'm
me,
not
that's an
gonna-
And so
Attorney
is this
General
the-
issue.
the
Okay.
impropriety, the financial impropriety
And
of
to the point
getting
where this
financial
is an
benefit from a
internal
job that
HR
translated
issue, it doesn't change
her
the
way
fact
on
that
these
Mike
trips
Roman
with money
individually
paying him
is
and
one of the
approving.
most
This is
devious
what I call undisputed. You know, some of the other stuff
challengers
is
to
on his credit cards,
democracy.
it looks like there's trips to Charlotte,
And
Florida, and other things
I'll
like
tell
that.
you right
But this is
now,
what we could
Mike Roman
undisputed say
is very
for Ms.
frightened.
Willis.
And so there's no doubt in my mind that he will go to great lengths to try and save his
So, Mike,
ass
You're a
from
good
dying
investigative reporter here, so
in
you're-
prison.
you
And
have heard
Wade
these
had
rumors, and now
cancer.
Mr.
Mr.
Bradley,
Wade
just by
had
almost happenstance,
cancer.
you're with him in court.
All of
And
this,
he
she,
spills the beans and verifies
I
it,
thought
and
when
you
she
get
took the
documents
case,
to prove it's accurate.
when she took the
And you
case, I
show
thought,
and
wow,
identify
a
year
county
to
DA
year
is
to
taking on
say,
one of
yeah,
the
that's the one
biggest,
who's
most
trying to get him
complicated
what they were
cases
Yes. And you know, I developed
against
it.
the
You talk
coup.
about my investigative skills.
And I
I've done
thought,
public defense
bravo,
most of my
and
career. You know,
I'm
at some point in
scared
that
for
whole
her,
area,
and blah, blah,
it's hard to
blah.
get money
I
for
had no idea
investigators,
they
so
would
I've
rip
learned how
her
to do a
to
lot of
pieces like this
and you know, I
over
dig a lot on
nothing,
things. So,
over
and I
an
do like to use
HR
the facts,
issue.
so I was able to do that and get a lot of information.
I
What I
have,
did was I compiled all
go
of the
ahead,
information throughout
figure
the
it
DMV,
out,
and
but
then
at
I
the
did
same
various open
time,
records requests
what
based
the
on it.
remedy of this
And then,
is that
you know,
they're
once I would get
asking
something, I
for
would
is that
reach
the
out to him
entire
directly, because
office
I wanted
be
to make sure that I wasn't
dismissed.
tracking anything that was
Not just
was
Fani,
wrong.
not just Nathan
You know,
Wade,
I didn't want to make any allegations
the
that I
entire
couldn't possibly
office,
make. So I would
which means it
regularly
could go
verify
to
with
a
him. And I'd see him
Republican
in court. We
district
talked on the phone
attorney who
several
could
times.
say,
I wasn't the only
I'm not
person
going to
that he
try
told about
this,
There was
and
another
throw it
defendant
out.
on the case, Manny
Throw it on
Aurora.
the trash
His
heap.
client ultimately pled out, so he didn't continue this investigation.
That's what's at stake
but he was
here.
involved in the investigation
So it's
early
more
on.
than just
And Mr. Bradley told him
the
some of
heinous
same
act
things that he
of
told me.
ripping
So, you know, I was
the
able
lives
to
apart of
independently
people
verify
who
a
are
lot of
trying to
things,
do the
which
right
to me,
thing.
investigating is important. You know, that the East Point location, that it was in Hateville.
It's
you
an
know, how many
actual
he actually
threat
did
to
quit. You know,
the
Mr. Bradley
serving
had
of
told me
justice.
Quit, or how'd that
And
go?
no,
it means that the
I don't
dirty
believe she was
tricks
forced to quit. That was a point of contention
are
in our
what
hearing.
win.
She said she left.
And
that
we
she was
cannot
sent
let
to another
dirty
division.
tricks
It's my understanding she had some,
be the
she was outspoken about
antithesis.
some of the things that was
Well, we
happening in her
can't
office,
we
and
can't
she
let
voiced
dirty
that she
tricks
was
be
sent to a
what
different department to
what
work, and it
rules
wasn't
the
something
day.
that she wanted to do
They
because
tried
she
the same
did
thing with Stroke and
communications,
Page, Trump on
so
the stump
she
talking
quit
about
after
the
that. That was my
lovers. I
understanding,
know,
based on her
I
testimony
know,
and, you know, the allegations on the pleadings.
I
So
know.
we might be skipping parts
They're
of
almost
your
like super
investigation. It was
chuds,
pretty darn
Max.
thorough, and you
They're
had
like hyper chuds.
done this track hawk, cell hawk,
They're
what's it
like
called when you're tracking
the hyper
okay, you were
chuds of
mentioning to me
everything.
earlier when I
I'm
couldn't
not
pick
even
up
giving them
that
volume. I
employees can have it
apologize.
on
It's
their
because
own
we
phone
heard
if they
days
want
of
to, and
this,
they
and
she could
there
have
is
gone back
no,
and proved
there
that
is
they had been
no,
communicating
oh fuck,
before he was hired.
Yes.
there is
So
fucking
let me explain
no.
that because there's two different systems.
All right,
And, you
I'm
know,
gonna
I'm
shut
always
up.
learning new new things about this, but cell phone data is one of the new things in criminal defense. We see it in a lot of cases. The CellHawk data that you just showed, that is geolocation data. That is different from the Cellbrite. So there's two different programs. CellHawk is the program that does geolocation data. Essentially what you do is you get all of the pings. So every time your phone, you see those cell phone towers everywhere. Every time you use your phone, it's trying to find the closest tower. So in a metro area like this, there's a lot of towers. That's why we get good signals. So when he's in Hapeville, there's a lot of towers. So we can really, really narrow it down. So what we had our investigator do, and I'm only talking about the geolocation stuff, I'll talk about the text in a minute, but what we had our investigator do was narrow it down. We got all the raw data, and we had him narrow down, and we actually excluded a ton of things that were not right on top of this location. Like, we wanted to be very, very careful just to have what was literally right on top of this location. So he created a geolocation fence, which...
The location you're talking about is Miss Yurdy's condo?
Yes,
okay.
It is Miss Yurdy's condo, that area. So he was able to find, essentially, just to summarize a couple of the things, where Mr. Wade would call Miss Willis at midnight, something like that. And then all of a sudden his phone would travel, and you can actually watch it. When you do the live CellHawk, the app, it's pretty cool. You can actually watch the phone travel, and it's pinging because you're using it. If you have an app open, your phone's pinging. So my phone's pinging right now because I'm sure I have an app open. So it's pinging from his house all the way down to the condo at midnight, 1 a.m.
Which app?
And he calls her.
Wait, is it like Bumble?
And
is it like
then
Bumble?
it
Are
goes
you
silent
doing
for
like
4 or
a
5
third?
hours. And then,
Are you
early in the
asking
morning
for a
hours,
third?
he starts pinging
To
again,
open
driving
marriage?
back, and then he
I'm kidding.
texts her when he
She's
gets
never
home.
married,
So,
but I
and
know
we-
This
of
is
anyway.
before he
SB,
gets hired in November
I think
of
Fani
21.
does have a
Yes.
case against them, and I hope to
So,
God
and there's
that
there's
she
a couple
takes
different
the
ones,
merchants
and
for
I would defer
everything
to the
that they're
experts
worth.
on the
And
CellHawk
Mike
data, but that's the
Roman.
summaries
And Donald Trump. He
based
won't
on
do anything at
what
that
we
point.
had him do.
It
And
doesn't
again,
matter.
we tried
Mike
to be very,
Roman
very
must have
narrow.
some
There were a
Russian
lot
money
of dates
somewhere, I'm
that
sure.
it looked like
I know he
it
does.
happened also,
I know
but
it.
maybe he was bouncing off a different location, and so we wanted to be very narrow.
So is that why y'all asked him in the hearing, how many times had you been to this you already kind of had the date on him?
Well, so that's an interesting
Last
point.
time I
all we
checked,
have as defense lawyers is the right to subpoena
sex
evidence.
between
I have
two
to have an
unmarried
evidentiary
but
hearing to do that.
separated
I could not
people
issue a subpoena for
was legal.
AT&T for this
So
evidence
I'm
until
still
I had
not
a
sure
hearing
where
date.
that crosses
So,
the
and
line.
it takes a while
Now
to get
again,
this
if this
stuff.
is an
We got it
ethics
that
thing
morning.
about hiring
So,
your
the morning
boyfriend,
of the hearing, and
great.
obviously I'm
Let
kind
them
of
deal
busy
with
doing
it.
the
Let
hearing.
the attorney general deal with it. That's not my
we
business.
got
I
that
want Mike
data.
Roman.
My paralegal was literally trying to download it for the investigator at the time and get it over. We knew we had the data, but we didn't know what it showed. So at that time, we didn't know, what it showed really until he was able to do the analysis. We had some preliminary reports from him, but nothing. I mean, it took a lot of hours. It's a lot of data. So it takes a lot of time to pinpoint this information.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I was talking about, so this is the CellHawk report, and heat map is just like how many times it's pinging, heavy concentration is you're talking a lot at this time, or you're at that location a lot. There's a lot of usage. The other thing I was talking about, just to make sure it's clear, so that's CellHawk. Cellbrite is a different program. Cellbrite, and it's Cellbrite. Cellbrite is a program similar to CellHawk, but it downloads data in the phone. So like this one is you pinging off of towers. It's geolocation.
Showing where you were.
Exactly.
At a certain time.
Cellbrite actually can get your texts, your pictures, your app usage, all of that stuff. So it's one of those things that if you want, if a defendant is threatening someone by text and they delete it, they'll take their phone and hook it up to Cellbrite. Cellbrite it makes what's called a forensic copy of the phone, but you can also limit the data. So it's a very expensive program. So not a lot of people have it. So when I have my clients use it, it costs a lot of money for them to have it done. But the DA's office has it. They have the software. They pay for it. You can find that in their open checkbook. The city of Atlanta police have it as well. But what you can do is you can copy cell phone. So what I had mentioned earlier is
You have to have the cell phone to do that?
You do. You have to have the
So
cell phone.
what
to
did
do it.
Mr. Bradley give y'all his cell phone? Or
No.
how'd you get Mr. Wade's cell phone?
So we did not get that data from Mr. Wade. So we only got the geolocation data from Mr. Wade. We cannot, I do not have the power to get the text messages. I don't have that power. I would have to have a search warrant. The state's the only one that has the power to actually get
I
someone's
agree
text
with that.
messages
Give me
out of their
coffee.
phone. But
I
my whole
agree
point
that
in
it's,
saying that was if I had been accused of having an affair
this one
and it didn't
threatens them the
start,
most.
you know, and I said it started in April and
God,
someone
she
else said
really
it started in
does, doesn't
November,
she, Pepper? It's
they
almost
have the ability.
disturbing.
I don't have the ability.
Plus, they were
have
friends
the
before
ability
they
to
started
plug that phone into
dating. Yeah,
Cellbrite
you know,
and
that happens.
print out
There's
a
a lead up.
report
Right.
that shows
I
all
think
of the
they've.
texts.
I think I get the
Mr.
picture
Wade
from what
and
they
Ms. Willis
testified
had they
to.
wanted to disprove your
You know what I'm
allegations,
saying?
could have
Like, I
just
think
used
I
that
get the
Cellbrite
picture. I
program,
don't know.
and it would have shown no
I don't know what you guys
communications
think.
between them.
I
Yes,
just feel like
and
it
would
still
have also
doesn't
showed
matter
the
to me.
contents of the
What
text.
does matter
If the
to
texts
me
are romantic,
is
if
Mike
they're not
Roman
romantic,
paying
if
the
they're
price
friendly,
and having
you know,
his
and
day in
they
court.
they would control the
That
data. So if
matters.
there's something that was privileged, they could redact it. If there was something that you know, if they wanted to only limit it to like, we want to prove that we weren't talking romantically in November, they could
So
limit
they
it to
could have
that.
actually pulled up the text itself to say, hey, I need you to help me work on this case, or else, hey, I need you to meet me at the Love Nest.
Yes, 100%. Yes, I don't have that ability, so
people are
I don't have
sick.
the ability to get
These
a search
people are
warrant and get
fucking
that
sick.
data. All I have the ability to do is get that geofencing.
Well, who found out about these 12,000 texts and calls and all that kind of stuff?
That is what I was able to get by subpoena. So I was able to get the geolocation data by subpoena. What I can't get is what's inside of the phone. I can't get the texts inside the phone.
The words in the text.
Exactly.
But you were able to find out that they were texting each other
Oh, yeah.
prior to November 1st of 21.
Yes,
How
and-
did you find that data? Is that anything you've produced to us?
That is, so the CellHawk data actually analyzes that. So you can see, we just summarized 2021. So approximately 12,000 interactions, that's voice and texts for the year of 2021. And again, remember, 2021, he didn't get the contract until November of that year.
Right.
So most of 2021, he's not under contract. Over 2,000 voice calls, almost 10,000 text messages.
How did they explain that? Did you confront? We're not privy to what all came out in
Right.
evidence at the hearings that you've had. Did you get either one of them to say, that's not true, we didn't really talk 12,000 times? Or
No, what they did was they filed an affidavit saying that geolocation data is not always reliable.
okay.
She's trying
Does
the
that apply
case
to
she
Cellbrite
wanted to
data, though?
try.
No, it doesn't.
okay?
And it was
Merchant
ironic
is
because
trying the case that she wanted to try, where nobody's rebutting her, nobody's objecting, nobody's disputing all of the way that she's contextualizing any fact. She's taking a fact and analyzing it for this Senate committee. It's just so stupid. Pepper, don't even worry. I'm having the same outburst over here. I'm just so tired of it. I'm tired of the manipulation of factoids that then become this spun narrative, when in fact the actual facts of the dirty deeds done by the people trying so hard to hide everything are so offensive, or should be, to everyone in this country, that I just don't understand how we got here. I don't know how we got here. I don't.
Yes.
And after having met,
I am happy that they televised. Thank you, SB. What a great thing to say. Now I am happy that they televised Fonnie's case, because otherwise this hearing would have been publicized to remove her. You're right.
right, and so then
You're
you
right.
somehow preserved, you had text communications.
I understand the ups and downs and the, but sometimes I really feel like the transparency is helpful.
You wanted him to verify the accuracy of what claiming had happened.
I did not want to
Oh,
say one word that
sorry. Absolutely. So Nathan Wade was suffering from prostate cancer during the time period that this is all taking place, I think 2022.
Right, and
So that's who had it, Paul. He has it, I guess. It might be in remission, I believe I heard, but I can't recall.
I did. So I actually, Mr. Bradley uses a Android, I believe. And so it was not easy to just download them. And I'm not the most tech savvy person. There's a lot of texts that just went into things that I thought would just embarrass people and weren't relevant. So what I did was I screenshotted the texts that I thought were relevant. I tried to use those in court, but the prosecutor kept objecting and saying I was hiding things because I wasn't showing all of my text. So they just kept on and on for days saying I was hiding things. And I explained to them, I let them look through my phone. They scrolled through all my texts.
Who's they?
It was Adam Abadi was the prosecutor.
Okay.
So he just kept saying, that where's the beginning of that text? Where's the thing after that? Where's the other part of that text? These aren't complete. Rule of completeness, kept objecting. And I had just screenshotted the texts that I thought were highly relevant, but weren't slanderous, I guess. I don't even know the word. But, there were some that Miss Willis's daughter had failed out. Like, things like that. They were just ugly. They didn't need to be admitted.
Oh, yeah, I read that. We don't
I had
need
just,
to go there.
so I had tried really hard to just screenshot the relevant ones, but they kept saying that I was hiding stuff and I wasn't showing the whole thing. So when they objected to my text coming in the screenshots, they said they wanted the whole text chain, and the judge ordered me to, if I was going to admit the text, to go figure out a way to download all of them. So I bought a program for $20-$30 and took 3 hours, and I was very proud of myself for finally figuring out how to do it.
Sorry,
but
I
I
had
was
to
able to
refresh
make
chat.
a
Hi,
copy
Val.
of it and then redact our
Let me
phone
turn her
numbers.
down a little
So this actually
It was
showed
sexual
like
when he
when
probably
they're
couldn't
read,
be.
when they're
Yeah.
viewed.
What were you, all right, so up
Yeah.
there on January
much.
5th at 9:50
And
a.m.
so Fani basically said he was impotent during
asking-
that time
what
due
do
to
you-
cancer. She
read the
did,
question.
without saying it,
So
she did.
I'm asking him, do you think it started before
Yeah.
she hired him?
You're talking about the affair.
Yes, the affair.
And what's his response?
His response was
wonder what the
absolutely.
judge
It started
thinks
when
of
she
this.
left the DA's office
She's
and was
doing this
judge
for
in
the
South
judge.
Fulton. And so, these
This
are
is
things
such
that
a
he had
MAGA
told
thing.
me, but I was getting ready to
Isn't
file.
it?
My filing
It's so
deadline
MAGA.
was the 8th. And
It's so MAGA to go
as
to daddy and
we're-
whine.
As we're doing this, I'm
Daddy.
fact checking line by line,
Drugs.
basically.
So
You ever seen that thing in-
and
what was
did
it?
you send him a
In,
copy of your
Parks
proposed
and
motion?
Rec.
I did, and I
Jenny
actually
Slade's
admitted, so at the
character.
hearing that we had, I was able to
Daddy,
admit
give me
the
money.
email where I sent him
Give me
that.
money.
So I sent him a copy of the
money.
motion that
Give me
weekend
money,
when I
Daddy.
was when I wanted him to review it, and then he had a text. He didn't write me back by email, but
Don't
I
be
submitted my
suspicious.
email so that
Don't
the court could
suspicious.
see exactly when I sent it and when he responded, and then he responded
I
that
have
everything looked
trouble
good
with
because I asked, I
diphthongs.
said I'm sending
Hi,
you this
Wolfstan.
motion.
How
I need
are
you to look at
you?
it.
Yeah, she's
and then he responded that everything looked good. He actually told me at
She's
first he
mad.
wanted me to make some
I think
changes
chat is a
because
little
I had
delayed
not
for me. I'm so
included
sorry.
the
And so if
information
I
about
don't
how much money
acknowledge
he
you
had
right away,
received. I had
please,
only included the information about how much
accept my
Wade had
apologies.
received, and
Tried
I didn't
both
know that it
before the
was
fall,
it wasn't
lady.
really highly relevant to my motion.
dang it,
But
why is
he
this
was
not-
like, "Oh, that's going to tip them off that I'm talking to
Chat
you,
is
and
stuck.
I don't want." He did not want anybody to know that he was talking.
Well-
he was very concerned about what.
I'm going to
would
let you
happen.
just read through
Okay,
this,
you know
Jane.
what? I
Okay.
need
All right,
this
no, we
to.
left
This
off
is
up there.
disgusting. Okay, this is like
Began
absolutely
before it began when she
gross
was a judge
and
in South Fulton.
disgusting.
When was she a judge
100%.
in South Fulton?
100%.
She became a judge in August of 2019, and I did an open records. I first asked.
I hope she sues
actually, I
the
first did an
F
open
out
records,
of
and they
this
said no.
woman.
So
I
then
really
I
do.
subpoenaed the records
I
for
wonder,
the
can she
judicial
do
conference, the
that? Can
municipal
Fani
court
Willis
conference.
So
and
she was the
Nathan Wade
municipal
sue
court
this
judge.
woman
They were both municipal court
for like
judges. So I got
defamation
the,
of character?
Who's both? You mean Wade was the judge at the time
Wade,
Do you
also?
think that's
Wade was the
possible?
judge. He was actually a speaker on the
Oh my
panel.
God,
It was
this
October
frickin' chat. I'm so
2019.
sorry, everybody.
So I
I
found
must have done something wrong.
online an old agenda
will
where he
come
was
back.
speaking, and Terrence Bradley had told me
Yeah, she
that they
learned
met
how to use an
at a
app.
conference where Wade was speaking and
I'm
Willis
just
had
gonna.
gone.
Can I
So I knew
object to
that.
the
So I found-
blazer
and it was in
the
person,
and
so I
the
could narrow
and
it down
the,
because of COVID. I figured out when
whatever
COVID
that
happened
dress
and
is,
when
that
all the
Republican
conferences were
dress that
virtual.
she's wearing, that
Narrowed down my
handmade
timeline, so I searched for this specific
commander's
time period,
wife
which is
dress
when
that she's
Bradley had
wearing.
told me the relationship
Can I
started.
argue
And
with
when was
the?
that
Can I file
It was
an
October
objection
2019.
with the
So
court
I found the agenda
for that blazer
So then I
combo
reached out
with
to the
the
municipal
72
court
inch
judges
pearls
CLE
doubled to
group
be a
and
36
said,
inch strand?
here's an open records
I?
request. I would like a list of attendees because I wanted to verify Miss Willis went there because I was trying to fact
Is
check.
she going to
and
like
they
a-
said no. So I subpoenaed them and they gave it to me. I also subpoenaed.
Insurance
Was
conference
she in
after
attendance?
this? Will
She
she
was.
be
I also
at
Where
the
was that
local
conference?
conference
It was at Lake
center
Lanier.
in Orlando
I also
or
did an open
something?
records request to the city of South Fulton because I know that they
Why
have
am I-
to
oh, there
sign
we go.
off
And
if your
those
judge is going to
pearls.
go to a conference.
Baby,
So I did
that's
an open records
72
request to
inches
them to
doubled
make
to
sure that they had actually
36,
sent her
okay?
that. So I
know
verified
what
from
that
two
is.
different sources that she attended that conference.
It's
and that matched what Mr.
overkill.
Bradley had told me.
It's not daytime.
So,
Okay.
is that a part-time
It's
job? a
drawing
municipal job
attention
for
to-
the
it's
judge?
just
Yes,
wrong.
Okay,
it is.
so Wade could continue practicing law and do that
The
on the
entire
side.
outfit's
All
wrong.
right.
Well,
Okay,
so
I have
she
a
was a
problem with the
full-time, but Wade
entire
is a
outfit
part-time,
from
and Wade
stem to
only
stern.
did maybe once or twice a month
Okay,
at most.
do.
Okay.
Because he was in the city of Marietta. I mean, he was just judge for that. That wasn't his.
But
Okay, so you
primary job.
narrowed it
you
down
know,
to that's when the
I
relationship
also
began.
my bigger issue is
Scroll
obviously
through here
with
for
her
us, and
substance and the lack of
I
substance
can't
that she
read that
has.
green line. What's the
okay.
next, if you don't mind?
She
just
is
sort of
that.
read
Of
us
course.
through.
Oh my God!
It says,
she's
is
Woodstock.
this accurate? And this was again on
So
January.
you're saying, is
Jim.
this
She'll be
accurate?
back
You're
to
going
chasing
over this brief and
ambulances.
saying,
She
I'm
is a
about to swear
ambulance
this in
before
court.
you know
Will
it.
you
I know.
verify it's accurate?
Yes.
Her and
So
hubby
at that
would be
time, I was
doing,
going
like,
through the actual statement
his
because
and
I was
her
trying to figure out
divorces
how
or
to say
something,
it,
you know?
and so I said upon
No, they'll have a
information and
show on
belief,
TLC.
Willis and Wade met while both were
Merchant-in-law.
serving as magistrate judges and began a romantic
Hey,
relationship
Steve.
at that time.
I'm
And he
Alicia.
corrected me and
What's
said,
her
no,
name?
it was municipal court.
You had said magistrate court, and he said nothing.
Right,
The
and I
hands
was,
and the tenor.
you know,
Yeah,
just-
no, she definitely
I
is Woodstock,
slipped
but
up.
not a nice
I should have said
Woodstock, because I
municipal
like
court. I knew that.
Woodstock.
So you say thank you.
Wow.
What was his response
let's
after
not
that?
malign
No,
Woodstock. She's
this
like a fucked up
12-something p.m. on January 5th.
She's like a
as you're
MAGA
getting your
looking
pleading
Woodstock.
ready.
He said you can't put where
Little
they met.
more
Not many people know
makeup. She's
that. I
gonna-
might
she's
be
shooting for it,
one
Max.
of only.
Hells
Not even
yeah,
Chris
she's
Campbell.
going to be on the 5.
Chris Campbell was their other law
I
partner.
predict.
Yes.
Okay.
No, she
And
wants to.
I did not. I did not disclose Mr.
she
Bradley
wants to have her
in
own
my
show
initial
on
filing. I didn't
TLC,
until the state forced
where
me
you
to.
get to see
Why
the
was he
softer
afraid to
side
be
of the
disclosed
merchants.
Just because of his
Come in my
relationship with
country
Wade, or
kitchen.
was
I
he
mean,
afraid of
I'm
these
going to
people,
make
or
you a little
just didn't wanna
Confederate pie.
Multiple-
betray 'em, or what?
Multiple
Watch
reasons.
as
I
me
mean,
take all the
it's
white
the district
flour.
attorney in Fulton County. I didn't really want to go,
the white
file something
baking
against her. It's
soda.
not exactly a fun position to be
And the
in.
white sugar.
Also, I mean, they have a lot of mutual friends.
And the white
I'm
baking
sure
powder.
It wasn't a fun position to be in to be
And we
outing
make
a
our
friend of yours,
Confederate cookies.
But the attacks.
Come
I
on,
mean, that's-
everybody. Come on
it's-
in
it's
my
a small
country
legal
kitchen.
community.
I'm
Were
Ashley
you able to get
Merchant.
this into
And
court?
this is my
Because
husband,
Bradley, I saw
Steve.
some of his
My
testimony, all of a
name's
sudden
George.
can't
I don't
remember
care.
anything
Your
about
name's
anything
Steve now. Smile
Were
for
you
the
able to use this
cameras.
to impeach him and show that he did know precisely what happened and when?
Yes, and
That's
he changed his
the
testimony
money
somewhat.
lot.
At first, when he
208
first
market.
testified, he testified that he had never discussed this with me. And
Then you showed
2
his
hours
text
and 8
messages where
minutes.
y'all
One of
discussed
the
it.
well,
funnier
at that point,
jokes
I
of
that caught me off
one
guard.
of the
So,
funnier bits.
I didn't expect
Happen.
that. So then I pulled my text messages, and I'd had.
I'm
some
sorry I
screenshots
don't
of
have a
them
lot
just
of
in
volume
case.
on her, but you
and
know
I told
what?
his lawyer.
Have we
Do you
heard
wanna look
this?
at my
We've
text
heard all of
messages?
this before.
Um,
We've heard everything.
And so
Everything
then
that
he
she's
later
saying,
came
we've
back
heard.
and testified that yes, he had.
Had told you that.
Yes.
A little more makeup.
And,
Vanilla
Did they
extract.
testify to any of these
Vanilla,
He did.
you know,
Did
which
he
if it
acknowledge
were
the
ice cream,
relationship
guess
or
what
not?
color
acknowledged
it'd
the
be?
relationship,
That's
yes.
right.
Before
It'd be
he was hired?
white. Well, the thing
No,
is
he did
she,
not. So-
Jim.
so before I
Okay,
filed
this
the
is a
motion,
this is
nobody
a
acknowledged
this
the
is her
relationship.
reel,
So I
right?
filed
Okay,
the motion on January
in the
8th,
showbiz,
and then on Martin
everybody
Luther
has a
Walk us
reel.
through that. What were the
and that
grounds
shows your work,
that-
right?
why
It's like
is
a
it you
few
feel
minutes,
My
and it
client
really
in
shows
particular
your
was
highlights.
not part of the
So
special
she's
purpose
just
grand jury.
creating
They did
shit
not
for her
recommend
reel
him to be
because she
indicted.
is
He was not
going to
a
be
subject.
one of
He
the
wasn't
future
part
lawyers
that.
of Trump.
That's interesting, because I remember hearing that
Yeah,
the
she will.
special grand jury had
I predict-
recommended
I
prosecuting
predict,
like 40-something people.
She'll join
They-
Steve
He was not
Sadow
even in
or
that
something,
list
or
of
maybe
40.
just
He was not.
represent
And they
him
didn't
somewhere
take,
else. I don't
or
know.
they, as
Who
in
knows?
Fonnie Willis, did not take the
I don't
advice
know
of her
where
own
she's,
special grand jury
where
as to
she's,
more than half the people they wanted
Whatchamacallit,
prosecuted.
barred.
Subsequently, there's been a book that was published.
Where you
that,
barred,
called Find Me
lady?
the
I can't
Votes,
wait to see your
that
pictures
authors
with
had
Alina from the
exclusive
weekend at
access
Mara
to her,
Flargo.
and
Yeah,
so all
Jim.
of her
Here's the
theories
thing,
and
she's
how to
got
indict
the,
people and who to
you
indict
know,
was
and
explored in
I
that
love.
book.
First of
So
all,
from that, I was able to learn
I-
that she cut a lot of people.
she's got the look.
You know, and I mean, I
Was
have
that
my.
because they cut deals with
He's
them, immunity
got
deals, or
Some of them were that. Some of them I just don't think she wanted to bother with. You know,
then she added to the list, though, people that were not even recommended, or
My
at least your client?
my client, yes,
Okay.
she added him. So he was one of the ones. So there were some people, you know, and it's publicly available in that book, like Senator Graham, Loeffler, those Purdue, those people.
They recommended prosecuting them.
Right, she had considered prosecuting them and taking them off the list. So there were a lot of people
She's
that
got
had been
the
on the
love.
consideration and then had been removed.
She's got that MAGA
and my client had not been considered, and then he was added.
look.
So
She's got
to me,
the
I was trying to figure out, you know, what.
She's
like,
got
what-
the
why would-
Spanx on.
Why would you want to expand it? You know,
'Cause
there's different ways you
mama
can go about
doesn't
prosecution.
Did you figure out why
kids
they
and
add your
go
client to the list?
around
No,
with
but
body card without
my
Spanx.
allegation and my motion is that, the bigger the
Yeah,
case
she's
is, the more
wearing
money that's made. And that,
Spanx.
that made sense to me.
Oh,
So
there's
for me to
Spanx
file
under
the motion to disqualify,
there.
obviously, we
And
had to
they're
have some type
holding
of a
in
basis,
what little
besides
soul she has
all of the violations. And so
But she's
expanding
soulless.
litigation,
Yeah.
because of how large it is, they've now,
that's
the judge has said
another
we're probably
lie
going to have 3
that you
trials,
told
and
to
each of them is going
yourself
to take several
along
months.
with the
Where if
fact
you
that
just
those
imagine,
extensions
follow me
look
down the path, if you only indicted one
the black and
If you
red.
indict 19 people,
It's like she said,
and,
just
you know,
hand me
3
any
different,
jacket, I
essentially
gotta
alleged
go,
criminal
I'm
schemes,
late.
you
My
know, like I
Starbucks
divided up
order
earlier,
has
that
been
you
ready
now have
for
a
an
3 years of trial.
hour.
You know, you've now gone
Yeah,
from a month
gotta
of trial
pick
to 3
up
years of trial.
my
That's a lot more
mobile
money.
order.
And
Yes,
so
I
that,
do.
to me, was a financial motive, particularly since my client was
They
not
have
recommended by the
this
special purpose
new
grand jury to be
coffee
indicted.
and they put fucking olive oil in it.
And you had the data to show that
Does
she was
that not
financially
sound like
benefiting
the
from the continued
wokest thing
prosecution.
on the
Yes.
planet?
And so to answer your question, you were saying
Olive
walking
oil
through it.
in
So
your
January
coffee.
8th, I have a deadline to file this.
What
so
are they
I'm
doing to
verifying
coffee?
it, and that's what you can see in the text. You can see heavy
Why
text
do
with
the
Mr. Bradley right around
leftists
then
want to
to
ruin
verify
coffee?
everything. I file it, and at that point,
Why do
the
they
world is
put
shocked.
olive oil
It's shocked because nobody
in
had
their
any idea. This had been
coffee?
hidden. This was hidden from
Yeah,
her father,
yeah,
who she had testified
yeah.
to
Where
today.
was I?
So
I
very
can't
few people knew about this relationship.
remember.
And
But
so
I'll
they
tell
very
you
much
right
wanted to know who about it.
now,
Mr.
that
Bradley,
all-day hold
that
hairspray
next weekend,
was
he gets
a
some calls about,
lie.
he gets a call,
Yeah,
trying to
it
fish to
was
see if
a
he's the
lie.
leak.
Yeah,
Is
that
what it was couched
hairspray
as. He gets a call
can.
from a
It said
gentleman
it
named Gabe
held
Banks, who
all day.
ultimately
And here I am at
represented Chris Campbell in the,
11:30
he
with
filed a motion to quash
red
against Chris Campbell,
hair.
who's the law partner.
Yeah, I
Gabe
said
Banks'
weird
wife works for the DA's
hair.
office.
Yes, he does.
She works for Fonnie
And
Willis.
Yes,
then if
and
something,
I have not
something,
gotten it. I've not opened records it, but
if Trump
have been
doesn't
told
see
that
this,
Mr.
I'm
Banks also has
gonna
one of
be
these
so
special counsel
mad.
contracts. Again, I have not
I
opened records
look
that, not
better
part of
than
my case.
Kimberly. It's time
But so
for
he
new
calls Mr. Bradley,
blood.
and Mr. Bradley
Alina
calls me and
lost.
another friend of ours. Her name's
But
Cindy
guess
Weaver.
what,
She's
Trump?
district
I'm
attorney
not
in Cobb County.
gonna.
And
Yeah,
he
she
was upset.
says I'm not
I
gonna.
talked to him. It was, I believe, Saturday night, and
Yeah,
I could tell he was
I'm not
upset by his
gonna.
text.
And I won't put olive oil in my coffee.
He took it as
No, I
what he
won't
described
put
to
it
me
in
as
my
the first shot
coffee.
against the bow.
You
That they were
can't
trying to
make me
figure
put
out if it
that
was him,
woke
and they were trying to
olive
silence
oil
him.
in my
So, and
coffee.
silence him.
And he said
Yeah,
didn't say
I'm
anything that
gonna
threatened him.
go
He just out of the blue called him and he hadn't talked to him in quite some
Dunkin'
time. So it was
Donuts.
out of the norm for him
Yeah,
to call.
just stop
So
at
Mr. Banks
Dunkin'.
called and told him that
And I
was
got
asking
an
if
extra
he was the leak,
large.
meaning if
Watch
he
me
was my
go
source.
this water.
And Mr. Banks said that it was
Just
because
kidding,
he had
it's
seen a news
vodka
article,
every
and
morning.
Mr.
Yeah, it's
Bradley knew that
vodka.
wasn't the case, so he said, "Send me the
Have
news
you
article."
seen
So
what
he
I'm
sent him some
married
article that did not
to?
say he was the
Oh
leak,
my God,
and
I
that put an
thought
end to
he
it. But then
was
the
my
next day,
dad.
Mr. Wade
But
called Mr.
no,
Bradley's best
no,
friend
no,
and said
that's my
to remind to call.
hubby.
He didn't call Mr. Bradley directly,
There's
but
so
told his
many
friend to call
reasons
Mr. Bradley and remind him
that I
of
hate
his
happy
privilege.
people.
Client privilege.
Yes.
I hate happy people, so I'm gonna use my position as a lawyer
He
to
told me his name, and I'm
beat
not
them
positive. I
down.
think I know who it is, but I'm not positive.
Mike
So
Roman.
Wade calls Bradley's best friend, says, you better call Bradley.
Okay, I gotta stop for a
Remind him
minute.
he's got attorney-client privilege
Sorry.
with me, and he better not spill
I'll
the
turn
beans.
her up a
I
little
do
bit.
know the best friend works at a law firm called Beasley Allen. He told me that. He said his best
Okay.
friend's name, and then he said he works at Beasley Allen. And he was pretty upset about it. And it was the same day of Miss Yeager's.
This sounds like a lot of
birthday.
hearsay.
So he didn't want to call Cindy, but he was upset. So he called me, and we talked about it. And we were both pretty upset about it because it seemed, why
Tampering with witnesses.
it just seemed like tampering, and it's just, it's just an uncomfortable position to be in, and all of us were kind of worried how the state would react to all of this. But at that point, it's
Did
still.
he interpret that as Miss Willis trying to intimidate him from revealing this affair?
Or Mr. Wade.
Okay.
He took it as intimidation, yes.
Right.
Because what he called it as is the second shot across the bow. Those were his words. So he said first shot across the bow was
Wow.
Gabe Banks, second shot across the
She's
bow was
throwing
Heath
some
Wade.
big
Calling.
fucking
So that's how he
arrows
interpreted
this
it. But at that
morning.
point, I had not disclosed him as the witness, as the primary source. So nobody knew that, and I was trying to protect him as much as possible, just because I knew he didn't want these calls. It's not something that you want. So they filed some motions to quash, and I had to
Quash what?
to quash all of the subpoenas, pretty much every subpoena that I had issued. The
So
state,
after you file this motion to disqualify, I guess a hearing was scheduled,
yes,
and
yes,
then you started issuing subpoenas to line up your evidence.
yes.
That's when this witness tampering occurred?
Yes.
After that, to try to intimidate your witnesses from coming to court?
Yes. So, and let me walk through the timeline. So I filed this on the 8th. The next thing that happened was Miss Willis testified. I say testified. She spoke at a church on Martin Luther King Sunday, and was making some statements about why did they single out Mr. Wade. Didn't say anything about that we singled him out because he's the only one she's having an affair with. Did not agree to that. Instead said that it was racially motivated.
And the other two special prosecutors were white.
Yes.
But they were making significantly less money.
Right. And she even said, to the church, she even said that I'm paying them the same rate, which is not true. Mr. Floyd's contract is for $150 an hour. It's never been $250 an hour. So that, one of my kids was listening to it and, said, come listen to this. And I listened to it and I was like, wait, that's not true. So that was one thing that she said that wasn't true. Also that it was racially motivated. She didn't say anything about, yeah, they're singling him out because he's the one I went on all these vacations with and he's the one I'm romantically involved in. Instead, she said that we were singling him out because of race. And then she said that they were all paid the same, which is not true. So I thought at that point, okay, they're not going to admit that they have this relationship. And so I'm texting with Mr. Bradley, oh my gosh, are they going to lie about this? Like, it's on their credit cards. Like, I don't know what's going to happen here. And so then in the divorce proceedings, Ms. Willis had been subpoenaed to testify, and she actually invoked her executive privilege as the DA.
That. She wouldn't testify.
She would not testify. So then
they settled it.
Right, and then they settled it because because the judge said he was going to have to testify. So they settled it, and he did not have to testify. So at that point, the judge had given us a hearing date, so I was able to issue subpoenas. So my subpoenas started going, and I filed the returns of the subpoenas, and all of a sudden the motions to quash started coming in. Right around that time, the state filed their response where they admitted to this relationship, but they put limits on it. So their response that they filed, I believe it was February 2nd, I believe, February 2nd. So on February 2nd, they filed their opposition to our motion. They admit that there was a romantic relationship, but they claim that it started after he was hired and that all of the gifts and travel was roughly divided. They submit an affidavit from Mr. Wade, and they submitted a receipt from a credit card where she had paid for one plane ticket. So, it was a couple $100 on hers and then thousands of dollars on his. So then my subpoenas were filed, and every single one of them had a motion to quash. And they kept saying, I don't have a good faith basis, kept very harshly saying that I was making this up and nobody had told me this and it was, gossip and I was lying and I should be sanctioned. So the court held a hearing on their motions to quash, and I was forced to disclose Mr. Bradley as a witness, which I did not want to do because I was worried because I knew they had called and all of these things, but I had to disclose him as a witness. And so at that point I was still talking with Mr. Bradley fairly regularly, but that then changed.
Okay. So you're waiting on the judge to rule on your motion to disqualify?
Yes, sir.
In summation, the grounds for that are what? That this is improper for a prosecutor to have a relationship with the special prosecutor?
Yes, that it's a conflict of interest.
Okay. And that's because of the financial benefits or just because?
Mainly the financial benefits. There's a couple different
I thought
aspects
it
to it.
was,
We've also alleged some other misconduct
I thought
because
Haley
the
would
prosecutors
stay or
aren't
go
allowed
to a
to
third
publicly
party or
condemn an
something,
accused
but
prior to trial.
the fact that she
And
said,
she
"I
made a
can
speech
never
at
do
a
public or
church
private
and
life,"
said this was
says
racially
to me
motivated,
that she's like, "I can
talked
make more
extensively
money
about the clients being
speaking
guilty.
and being on
She
boards
testified at our
and,
hearing that our clients were
helping
guilty,
dictators.
that my client was, guilty of
Luckily,
trying
I
to,
was never
I don't
a
even
servant to
remember,
begin with. I'm
subvert
not
democracy or
public
something.
servant. I never
But
was,
she's made
never
a
will be.
number of public
See ya.
statements
It was
condemning their
fun,
guilt,
but
which is
I'm
not
out.
allowed.
That's
what I think.
inappropriate conduct for a prosecutor?
Very much so. And there's case law on that. There's bar rules on that. So there were a lot of public speeches that were made along the way. And, they're you can kind of follow them through this media monitoring company. But so she makes these, and then she got disqualified from prosecuting another person she wanted to prosecute.
For making public statements?
It was for a fundraising. She had thrown a fundraiser for his opponent, his political opponent.
Right.
So when that happened, you sort of see her press stuff dwindle a little bit. So she stopped making as many public comments. But then when this motion came about, she made the church speech, as I'd call it, where she's, calls me and, my client racist, and says, it condemns their guilt. And then she also gave interviews to this book. I don't know, the timing was just, it was just nuts. But the book came out right around the time that all this was happening, and it's called Find Me the Votes. And
that came out in 2024, you're saying?
It came out a month ago, if even. And she literally let the authors of this book in when she was deciding how to prosecute this case, who to indict, who not to indict. I mean, their whole thing is that they had unfettered, behind-the-scenes access to her thought process and stuff. So, and she's talking about all of this.
Okay, stop it.
That they're guilty.
People
but the
can
big
claim
thing
all
for
that
the forensic
shit.
misconduct is she's in the church
Oh,
speech.
no
She's
problem,
saying,
gal.
and she says this in the
Good
book too,
background.
that God has told her to prosecute them. So the theme between these two things is that God told her to do this, and that she is doing the will of God by prosecuting our clients. And that is,
That's unethical.
in my opinion,
All right, so there was, I'm
There's a lot of
trying to
opinions
recollect
going
what I
around here.
remember reading in
Lots
basically
and
the
lots of
Atlanta
opinions.
newspapers about all this, because this was new to the state Senate as well, because all of this began on January 8th, which is that the day we started, 8th or 10th or something?
it did, and that's-
it was the day session began, and all of a sudden these bombshell allegations come out, and I think that was the motivation for our Senate resolution forming this investigative committee to say, let's find out if this is true, independently of all you guys' legal issues or whatnot. So I remember she wouldn't testify in the divorce case.
right.
But did you subpoena her to testify in your motion to disqualify?
Yes, and she filed a motion to quash.
She refused to testify, but then she came to court and did testify.
Yes.
Okay. And in that,
As they were arguing the motion to quash.
I wonder, okay, so in that testimony, did she deny the start date of this affair?
Yes, she said it started in early of 2022. There was some discrepancy between them, a month or two here and there, whether it started, generally it was around March, is what Mr. Wade
So
and Ms.
what are the
Willis-
consequences for an attorney to give sworn testimony that she did if you're Bradley, what is it, Yerke?
Yerty.
Yerty, your Trackhawk data, your other independent verifications are found to be truthful?
It's a crime. It's a felony. You'd lose your license.
Okay.
It's perjury.
Same for Wade.
Yes. And we have rules that are one of the, outside of privilege and confidentiality, we cannot suborn perjury. So if I have a client who tells me I did it, I can't put them on the stand to say I didn't do it. I would lose my license over that. I cannot do that.
And Yerty came to court and said, oh yeah, this started in 2019.
She saw them, she saw them together. She testified that she saw them romantically together, and,
them like she was looking
they
in
were
the
very
bedroom?
close.
And
So she was like in the bedroom?
you had Bradley's
She was,
text
like, in the
message that
bedroom,
showed
right?
he
Is that
confirmed
what
that absolutely
I'm
back
gathering?
in January.
Yes, and he had a lot of
Forward.
details, little details that matched up.
Did you get other details from him by phone?
Yes.
That wasn't in the text? What did he?
A garage door opener that Mr. Wade had a garage door opener, and then I've subsequently learned that he told Mr. Aurora the same thing. Things
Garage door opener to her
to
place?
her place.
Okay.
Yeah, to her place. There were other things. Just a lot of context. Things about how freely Mr. Wade could go in and out of the office, the DA's office,
It's
stuff
just
about
sound
they
bites.
would sometimes
It's
use
just-
hotels.
this is
One thing
useless.
that he told me was that Mr. Wade had,
And
before he
she's
filed
not
for
even a
divorce,
good
had used
clueless.
Mr. Bradley's
Like,
credit
she's a bad
card,
clueless.
and then paid him back in cash.
She gives Valley
For,
girls a bad name.
so that there wouldn't be a record of it.
No,
Okay.
they just have the power to malign her
All right,
and
so
defame
I'm
her.
A little
that's what they're
puzzled by
working
the
on.
legal standard. I'm
Because
reading
you don't know.
the newspaper articles that explain to us the difference between a
I
conflict
don't
of
know if they have the
interest
power. This
and an
Senate,
appearance of a
I would think
conflict
it would
or an
have to be
appearance
like
of impropriety.
That is the
big
big
Senate.
argument right now, and I'm not the best person to explain that. My
Stop
husband
it,
argued that
Steve.
part, but appearance of impropriety. It's one of those
God.
things like that. If it undermines the outcome, undermines the confidence in the outcome, and we spent a lot of time in our brief talking about the constitutional underpinnings of this. Due process, that my client has a right to due process. He has a right to a fair and impartial prosecutor, and we don't think that's happened in this case. And so I think that would be more along the lines of the appearance of impropriety, and then actual impropriety is receiving money, like receiving money and not paying it back. And there was testimony about that. You know, Ms. Willis came in and testified, and Mr. Wade did, that she paid him back in these sums of cash, but there's no records of any of that or where she got it.
Anything shows him depositing cash or
No,
receiving cash?
no, and you know, we asked her like where you got it. She said that first she said she borrowed it from her campaign. So, you know, she said the original large sum of cash came from her campaign.
I
She
think
took
all
that
of
out.
us up here that
I
have
don't
campaigns
think
know you
she said
can't
that.
take campaign funds for personal use,
I
right?
don't
I'm not
think
well
she's
versed in that
saying
area of law, but that is
I
my
don't
understanding.
It's
think
pretty
she
black
said.
and white.
So she
Fucking
testified that she
fuckers.
took that
No,
the majority of the cash she
Oh
had,
my God.
you know, on hand
That
was
is
from
not-
her campaign.
she's
that
oh my
alone she
God.
had given herself from the campaign.
Is
She was
anyone
very
gonna
clear about
stop
that.
this?
And then she also said that when it got low, she would
Is anyone
supplement it
gonna
by
stop
getting like
this?
$50 back at Publix. But I mean,
What?
she's giving him, you know,
Stop it.
$4,000, $2,500, so you know, large sums of
Stop
cash.
it.
So
No, she's
and there's no
not.
trail. Obviously,
Oh
there's
my
no
God.
record of any of that.
Oh my God.
In some of the documents you produced to us, there were a couple of IOLTA trust accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Those were Mr. Wade's accounts?
Yes,
Okay, so he had more than one trust account in his law firm?
yes, he did.
And did you find any discrepancy or whether these funds were deposited there?
Yes, and you know, so he testified because we asked him where he deposited the funds.
And these are the funds where his paychecks basically from Fulton DA's office?
Yes.
Okay.
At first, he deposited them to his joint IOLTA that he had with his law partners, and then he started depositing them to his when I say personal, just him IOLTA, an IOLTA that did not have anything to do with Mr. Bradley or Mr. Campbell.
Do you think Mr. Bradley was aware that he was running the money through a separate account,
I think it might have been part of the reason that they dissolved.
that they broke up?
Yes.
Do you think his ex-wife knew that this money was being held in a trust account rather than previously it had been going through his own bank account?
His ex-wife didn't have any idea. I mean, you could tell from the pleadings that he was even making this much money. I mean, he filed some interrogatories and some answers in that divorce case saying that he made a couple $1,000s a month. I mean, very, very minimal amounts.
We knew he was making up to $35,000 a month under this contract.
Right, and he has a lot of money parked in one of those IOLTAs that's not disclosed in the divorce.
Okay. So that's, does it look like he was using his law firm trust account or his personal lawyer? IOLTA is a legal trust account, right?
Yes,
The interest from it goes to the state bar to help fund some
Yes.
indigent care or whatever, right?
Yes. As much as I wish we could park money in
No,
our
this is-
IOLTAs
I'm so
that
sorry.
was earned
Sorry
and
about
not
that
pay
noise.
ourselves, we can't do that. So when you earn money, you can't leave it in your IOLTA. IOLTAs are for client money, so they're a lawyer trust account, and essentially
It
what they
should have
are is
never
like if
gone
you
this
settle
far,
a divorce
Steve. It
case.
should
I'm
have
not a
never
divorce case.
gone
I'm sorry. You
this
settle
far.
a civil
I
rights
hope he
case or
does.
a
I hope
Personal
they're
injury case.
personal
admonished
injury
and
case,
they
and you get
remove it.
$100,000,
This is so
and
stupid.
60 of that's the clients and 40 of it's the
I just
lawyers.
finished
It
reading
has
the
to go into your
Scottish
IOLTA.
newspapers. Trump did the
It
same
sits
thing
there
with the
until
Scottish
you
properties.
clear the case out. You know, you
Ooh,
finalize
it's
the
all
case, you send a
rumor,
settlement
Steve.
letter,
This is all
you get the
stupid
amount,
fucking
and you
rumor.
have to put it in your
It's gross.
actual business account,
And I hope
and
she
then the
sues
client
the
gets their
F
check
out
for
of
their
these
part.
people.
So IOLTAs are very highly regulated
I
by the
shop
state
at
bar.
Ulta,
They
too.
can't commingle funds. It can't be earned money. It's got to be money that's
get
not
a lot of my
earned.
makeup at
And the interest does
Ulta.
go to the state bar, but once you earn the money, you have to pay it. You have to have it in your account because you have to claim it on your taxes.
Right.
I mean, lawyers wish that they could keep money in IOLTAs and not have to pay taxes on it until it was a year that
All right. So
Financially,
sometimes
they wanted to.
attorneys may take a retainer up
Yes.
front and bill against that retainer. Say, you might do that on some of your criminal cases. So, yeah, I'm
Yes.
going to take $25,000, I'm going to put it in my trust, and then I'll submit an itemized statement and pay myself as I earn the money.
That's exactly what they do with retainers that are refundable. So they would ask, you know, $10,000 retainer, and then if this month I billed $1,500, I send you a bill, and then I take the $1,500 and I transfer it to my business account.
Okay.
As soon as it's earned, you have to transfer it.
So these funds, if they in fact came from the contract with Fulton County, should have probably never been put in a trust account at all because they were already earned after he had done the work, and within some amount of time after that he sent the bill and he got paid for work that had already been done.
I mean, if they were put in a trust account, they would need to be transferred quickly.
Is that the kind of
I don't do that, but
ethical violation that can get you disbarred?
Who gives
they
a
are
fuck?
they highly regulate the IOLTAs. Highly regulate. I mean, the state bar like there's a list of places that we can do banking because they're regulated by the state bar. I have to go in person for most of my IOLTA transfers. They're not something that I can do like online banking. I mean, it's a pain. Okay. But yeah, so they're highly regulated, and we know these were deposited in his IOLTAs because the back of the checks for Fulton County show where they were deposited. And
have you asked him about this? Has he given any explanation for why he ran this money through a trust account, or is it still in there? We don't.
I mean, the last I knew, he didn't give any explanation. I mean, he just said that he pays for everything through his business, and then he basically just said his accountant figures it all out.
Okay. I know you have a court appearance this afternoon. You've been very patient with us. I'm going to give Senator Harold Jones an opportunity to ask a few questions. Under our rules, we do allow at least one member of the minority party to participate. And Senator Jones, you're not time limited. If when the buzzer hits and you've got to go to court, you tell us, but I feel like we got at least 15, 20 minutes or whatever. Oh, you definitely do, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. My court's at 1:15 in Fulton County, so, if I get in trouble, if you can call the judge, then I'm fine.
Number 9.
You got it.
I just wanted to go back to the issue about the conflict, because I think that's kind of what brought us all here to some extent. On one issue, in your brief, the most recent one that you filed.
The second one?
Right.
Okay.
On page 21 of that, you went ahead and acknowledged that the aspect about him not signing, I believe, or being duly authorized to be a prosecutor, that's already been handled in one court, but you're still bringing that issue back up. But it has been decided in the negative. In one court, of course, you are still bringing that issue back up.
Yeah, so you're talking about the oath?
Right.
The oath issue. Yeah, so Manny Aurora was working on this issue early on, and he filed a motion about the oath. At the time, it hadn't been filed. And in and of itself, that's not, that's not filing an oath. That's not going to get rid of a case. That's not going to disqualify in and of itself. Clearly, the judge told us that in an order. But I was trying to paint the entire picture and how I felt that it was relevant. And it definitely is not a ground that I was arguing for disqualification, but I felt that it was relevant because it shows that they were hiding this relationship, and all the evidence indicates that.
Right. Now I was just kind of showing why I'm moving on to this next particular point here, which goes to page 24 of your brief, which deals with, I think, the thing that's really out there in the media, which deals with the relationship and aspects of that some kind of way this creates a conflict of interest. And, of course, the judge is going to rule on that, but I still think it's important to kind of go through it. And you cite the case of Whitworth versus State. What in that case actually applies to this particular case?
I don't know if I'm looking. You said it was the last one that I filed?
Yeah.
So February 9th.
Yes, page 24.
Page 24. You said Woodward?
Whitworth.
I don't see Whitworth.
At the bottom, Georgia courts have developed their own standard for disqualification of prosecutors.
That's not my page 24. You must be looking at a different, the one that was filed February 9th at 3:47.
We can't hear you.
I'm so sorry.
Just pull the microphone just a little bit closer to you.
Yes, I want to make sure I'm following the same one. You're talking about the defendant supplemental reply that was filed on February 9th at 3:47?
No, let's go back.
Okay.
Let's use your first one.
Okay.
Yeah. One that's a little bit more. Okay. So that one there on the Whitworth case. Tell me how that actually impacts this particular case.
Which page are you referring to?
Page 24.
Page 24, okay. So the site is Whitworth. The court recognized a conflict of interest as a ground for disqualification. Held to arise where the prosecutor had acquired a personal interest or stake in the defendant's conviction. And I don't, I wish I had that case in front of me. I don't have the case in front of me. But essentially, to answer your question, that first of all is physical precedent only. So
right.
Yes, and we
but you did cite it.
And said
right.
that it's physical precedent only.
And you're using that as the basis, really, to say it's a conflict. There's no other case law that you actually use in this particular brief to say it's a conflict other than Whitworth, and also amusement sales, which deals with contingency fee.
Right.
And so in Whitworth, and I have the case if you want to go through it, it actually talks about that there's ways of citing the conflict.
Right.
Number one would be if he had, or prosecutor had actually spoken to the defendant, Has that taken place?
No.
Okay. Second, has he represented the defendant?
No, he hasn't. There was a motion early on. I didn't even bring this up here, and I don't think we talked about it in the brief, but there was a motion early on because Mr. Campbell, who's Mr. Wade's law partner, actually sent a mailer out to my client and all of the other defendants. Yeah. So I don't think anybody called based on that, but they did advertise to them saying, call us to represent you.
And then they came with the third, which says there has to be a personal stake in the defendant's conviction.
Right.
So is that what you're relying on there, that there's a personal stake in his conviction?
No, in the prosecution also. So, and in that case, that's physical presence only, and I don't remember the specific facts of that case, but it's not just a conviction. And obviously, the state wants it to be just a conviction, and we argued this extensively over 3 hours, I think, in front of the court. But it's also a personal stake in the prosecution, and that was an amusement. Prosecution in that case, that was a contingency fee case. So
That's
that was
correct.
Completely different. Yeah.
And so in amusement, it was a contingency fee case. So they had a personal stake actually really in the conviction because they only received the contingency fee when the conviction happened.
Right.
So what you're really saying is that they had a personal stake in just bringing the case because he can't have there's no personal stake in the conviction similar to amusement, correct?
Well, so amusement's a little bit different because there is no conviction in a forfeiture action.
Correct, but they're going to get money if they win.
Right, but there's no conviction.
But they're going to get money if they win. That's the key.
They get money if they keep the forfeiture. So it's where that was a forfeiture case. I think that was like game slots.
That's correct.
Yes.
But they get money if they win.
Right. But
that's the only way they get money.
Yes.
But they don't get money for bringing it.
So I just wanted to make sure it was clear.
Right.
That was not conviction because you can't have a conviction.
But they only get money if they're the victor. He's receiving his funds. Mr. Wade is receiving his funds because he's billing because the case is going on, correct?
Oh, yes.
Not because he wins a case.
No, he can lose the case and still make a ton of money off of it.
So what you're saying is the actual conflict is just bringing it.
No, the actual conflict is, that's a long answer. The actual conflict is lying on your disclosures about how much money
I'm talking
you
as far as this issue is concerned right here. When you use the with worth, you use amusement sales, and they say that there has to be an actual conflict. And amusement sales, and let's go back to Whitworth if we can, because in Whitworth, the person was actually told, the prosecutor was actually told by another prosecutor that they want the case to actually resolve in a conviction. Because what had happened was the defense attorney came to the prosecutor and said, we would like to plead. And the prosecutor basically said, no. He went and got advice from somebody, and that prosecutor said, we would like this case to resolve in a conviction.
Right.
And so the question, and that then was held not to be a conflict. They said that still is not an actual conflict, even though someone told that prosecutor, we want to see a conviction. We actually want to see it go to the end. Don't plea him out. And the court said, no, that's not an actual conflict, because what you have to show is there's an actual unfairness to the defendant in the trial.
Right.
Can you point to any unfairness in the trial that's taking place?
It's not in the trial, so it's not limited just to the trial. But to answer the first part of your question, when you were asking about the conviction of personal stake, Ms. Willis has made numerous public statements about her interest in a conviction. There's some emails that had been admitted as part of it, as part of some of the exhibits in the case. There's a lot of pleadings, so I don't know which one exactly.
She's
but talking about
supposed to
her
want
desire
to
for there to be
win.
a conviction
That's
and jail
why
time.
people
And then in my case, for
elected
example,
her.
so Mr. Wade
Oh
offered my client
my
misdemeanor
God.
probation. So we were the first people to get an offer. And we said no, we wanted a dismissal because he was not guilty. And that did not happen. So obviously there's an interest in him being convicted of something, because when the plea offer was for him to pay a $5,000 fine and have a misdemeanor.
So in reality, because you said that he wanted to extend the case out, he was actually trying to end your client's case.
With a $5,000
But it was going to end.
It
There was
would.
be no more. It would be no more billing on that case, because earlier you
Just
said,
mine.
but earlier you said that you believe, which was total speculation,
her.
that they created this case against your client to do more billing. And what you're just telling me now is that he was willing to stop his billing because he offered your client a misdemeanor, and you rejected it. You're the one who's continuing the billing.
I don't bill by the hour.
No, you're the one that's continuing to make him bill. He was willing to cut that off. You said, I believe that they created this case against my client
Right.
so they can continue to bill.
Not
Well, he
just my
basically went out and said, I'm tired of billing. I'm going to offer a misdemeanor.
Okay,
And you said no.
Take a couple notes because you had a couple questions there. I want to make sure I answer all of them. So the billing, so as far as the billing and the offer. So what I was trying to explain, and I'm glad you gave me this opportunity to sort of go into it in a little more detail. I tried to explain that there are really 3 classifications is how I broke the indictment down. There's the folks that are involved at the federal level. You see those people having, they were in D.C. Then you see the electors. Then you see coffee. These cases could have been
Ms.
handled.
Merchant, we can't even hear you hardly
Oh, I'm
up
so
here.
sorry.
Just pull
I
it
didn't-
up right to
sorry.
you. Pull it to the edge of the desk if you have to, so everybody
Okay.
can hear.
Sorry. Okay. So how I was trying to explain it is I separate this down into 3 different types of cases. And it could have been handled that way. Coffee County could have been prosecuted in Coffee County if it had been chosen to do that. The stuff with the federal could have been handled in federal court if they had chosen to do that. Then the electors would have been the only remaining case that could have been prosecuted in Fulton County. Instead of choosing to do that, and it's not just my client in particular, but that group in the middle, by putting them all 3 together, it expands the litigation. How it expands it is a couple different ways. It expands it because when you charge a RICO case, you can bring in evidence of everything. So essentially, instead of having a case, a quick case, a case where there's evidence against Michael Roman, only Michael Roman, we litigate that. They expanded it to include these 3 different classifications. What does that do? That means the trial is going to be a year. They can plead people out. They can plead Michael Roman out, they can plead this person out, they can plead people out, but they're always going to have that large enterprise. And it actually does, even if they pled my client out, the offer was for him to testify. So, for him to testify, even though he would not be on trial, his acts would still allegedly be on trial, which still expands the litigation because he's not gone. The deal's not, you can plea out and you're gone. Bye. We're not taking up time with you. It still expands it. So my whole point earlier was that this expands the litigation because imagine if we just had, like you see in other cases, one defendant. You can limit the information to just that crime and that case. Or you could have 3 separate indictments. But what we've done here is we've put them all together. You've made it so that it's necessary to try them to have 3 trials because there's no courtroom that can fit all of those people. So that expands the litigation.
So in the case that you cited, physical or not.
Which one? Whitworth?
Whitworth. It says specifically that when the prosecutor goes up, Morgan, who is the person who's not supposed to, who's talking to him, who's the prosecutor, Hobbs informs Morgan, who is the prosecutor, that he anticipated a successful criminal prosecution, but that any decision regarding Whitworth's proposal to Morgan was Morgan's to make. Morgan decided to continue to go forward. And they said that was not a conflict, that was his prosecutor's decision to make. And you're saying this is the case you cite. Well, in your case, they actually came to you and said, we're willing to give you a plea. And you said no, which is perfectly fine. But then you say, well, they want to extend prosecution on my client. They were willing to cut it off. And so therefore, the case that you cite is totally opposite than the situation that you're dealing with. How would you say that you have a conflict in this case? Based on this case, just based on this case. That was your first case that you cited in your brief.
I don't think it was actually the first case, but
The first was actually a federal case, but the first Georgia case you cited was Whitworth on this particular issue.
Right, on this particular issue.
Correct.
And again, I don't have Whitworth in front of me, and there's a lot of different facts about these cases. I would be happy to review it and let you know. But what I can tell you is that I still, and we still believe that this is to expand the litigation. And even if it's minor, the law says over $100, that's enough to have a personal interest. So what we've got is we've got these financial disclosures where they're not being truthful, as well as his lying under oath, which is the same thing my client is charged with conspiring to do, lying under oath about receiving a benefit over $100. So you've got those. You've got this concerted effort, which we have seen, unfortunately, drag out over the last couple months, this concerted effort to hide this information from the public, to keep this information out. I think that it is very reasonable for a court to think that that is a conflict of interest. And whether or not it's a stake in the conviction, a stake in the prosecution, we definitely definitely have seen a stake in the prosecution. And, you know, Whitworth, the problem with Whitworth, and this is... and you have to
Who
say-
actually
He
brings the
offered
case?
your client
district
a
attorney.
plea deal.
Well,
How do they get the case?
well, we know a lot more now because of the book Find Me the Votes. So we know a lot more than we normally would know. So, and that's one of the things that I talk about in my motion. In this case, it was actually Nathan Waite. So he's the one that he presented most of the witnesses, presented
How is your
most-
client charged? How are these clients charged?
my client was charged just in the actual grand jury.
Okay,
Yeah.
so a grand jury.
Yes.
Okay, so we had a special grand jury, and then you had a grand jury
Yes.
who made this determination.
Well, yes.
They
And
made
I-
a determination to bring charges, basically, to
yes.
indict, correct?
Yes, and I.
So are they part of all of this?
No. But I've never had the privilege of being inside of a grand jury, but I have heard a lot about what happens inside of a grand jury. It is a witness who comes, and in this case, it was actually the investigator for the DA's office. So just understand this. It is a very low standard of proof. It's probable cause. I have had clients who were dead indicted. I actually had a lawyer that I worked with at the public defender that was indicted along with his client because the DA presented an indictment that actually had the lawyer's name on it by accident, and the grand jury indicted him.
So you're saying the grand jury has flaws?
100%.
Oh, so would you think it'd be better for just the prosecutor to draw the accusations?
No.
So the
and
grand
I know
jury-
that's- I know you guys have a bill doing that right now. No, I definitely don't think so. The grand jury is better than no oversight.
Correct.
Definitely, but
Right.
it's a continuum. So my point in bringing that up is the grand jury is not perfect. The grand jury is. I'm not allowed to be part of the grand jury. It is not what I would call adversarial. So the grand jury is one-sided. They only hear from the prosecutor. So, and they hear hearsay. So in this case, using it as an example, the investigator for the DA's office listened to all the January 6th testimony, read all the testimony, went in there and summed it up for the grand jury. They present, the grand jury doesn't draw up the indictment. The prosecutor brings that indictment, and then they vote, and it's a majority. So all they have to do is a majority vote, and it's by a very low standard. It's a probable cause, which is about 25% proof. So you've got hearsay, you've got a witness who hasn't actually witnessed anything personally, you've got a standard of 25%. I think there should be much more safeguards on the grand jury process, personally, but that's for another day.
So you went through special grand jury and they made their recommendations. Then went to a grand jury and they, of course, made their recommendations. And how many persons have actually pled in this particular case?
2 or 3.
2 or 3 already.
And they were well, there was one, so the first gentleman who pled, he was a bondsman, and he was not, because of the state law for bonding agents, he's not able to actually run his business while he's on bond. So he had a significant financial interest in entering a plea early on because he was essentially couldn't work if he didn't enter a plea. And I mean, he got probation. You know, it was not what you would imagine in a huge racketeering case. You would not imagine probation and a $5,000 fine. The other 2 people who pled are both lawyers at the end of their career, and I can imagine when I'm close to retirement and I have my retirement funds, if I would want to spend them on a criminal trial or spend them seeing my grandchildren, I would spend them seeing my grandchildren.
One of the things we've been talking about is Mr. Wade's kind of qualifications. So,
yes.
But you did mention early on that he was very instrumental in the special grand jury process. So he's been there. He's been part of this process.
Oh, you can see that by his bills, yes.
Right. So other than just his bills, you said that you recognize that he's been part of the process. So even though he's very, I guess, what everyone's saying is inexperienced, he was able to go to a special grand jury and get their positive recommendations, I guess, from state side. He's able to go to a grand jury and get indictments, which positive for the state side. And he's actually had some persons actually plead guilty. So this inexperienced former assistant solicitor, I mean, he's not doing too bad, is he?
That would be up for dispute. I mean, if you want to talk about his qualifications and whether I think he's qualified, I'm happy to talk about
No,
that.
I'm just saying. I mean, when you say that someone's totally unqualified, that's basically what's been going on. It's very surprising he was able to go to a special grand jury. You say he's integral in that.
That's not surprising at all.
And he's going to a grand jury, and you say he's integral in that. Then why even say that he's unexperienced and he's getting people to plead guilty? But basically, you're saying those are just lawyers that don't want to do anything anymore, and they just pled their clients guilty.
No.
I understand.
No. So the special purpose grand jury, first of all, remember my client was not recommended as far as that.
I understand.
And the special purpose grand jury, I've had the opportunity to read a lot of the transcripts from that. It's direct examination. So you're bringing a witness in and you're talking and you're saying, tell me what happened. So did that along with Mr. Wooten, and he never did it all by himself. He definitely led it, but Mr. Wooten asked a lot of questions, and there were some other prosecutors in and out, but he was always there. But that, I mean, special purpose grand jury is really just to investigate and get testimony.
I understand.
So it's not.
But when a person's trying to insinuate that somebody's basically totally unqualified, it is important to realize that they've walked this case to this particular point. Very complicated case, I'd imagine.
I mean, that's something that we could debate. You know, if walking someone through the grand jury, the special purpose grand jury is complicated or not. You know, asking questions, and again, there's a team of 10 lawyers. So
now there's a team of 10 lawyers.
Who knows what part he's doing? But the question would be then, why him? Why not all of the public servants who are taking government salaries and, you know, restricted in their private law practice? Why do they need him there when there's all these other people? As far as the qualifications, asking questions in a special purpose grand jury in and of itself, I mean, there's no opponent. There's no adversary. There's no judge.
Once it became adversarial, you've had persons start pleading. And maybe more potentially, correct? Possibly. But we'll find out. But let me ask you this, though, because you were talking about the staff. One of the reasons you may go outside to outside counsel could be the fact that if you actually put this type of case within the office, just speculating, but to some extent we all are, the office would basically shut down. It's a potential that the DA's office had actually basically shut down.
Oh, God, no. If you took the $1 million that he's been paid, you could hire 5 lawyers.
You could do that, but how long would you be able to keep them? In other words, if you hired 5 new inexperienced ADAs, they're not tackling this case. And also,
well, the inexperienced ADAs are not going to make $200,000. So if you're hiring inexperienced ADAs, you'd probably be able to hire 20. But that's not what.
But the key thing is that job that you're talking about that you're going to hire with that, with the $1 million that you'd have paid him.
Yeah.
If that's your theory on it, that's not going to stay. That's not necessarily going to be long term if you're just you're just saying the money you paid him, you could have done this. Because his is a short term kind of situation. His is on contract, so it's short term. It's not a long term contract. It's not going to last for a person's career. So I understand the back and forth when persons were saying, well, they could have used this money for that. But that money was delegated for him on the short term project, so to speak. So it's not anything that a person would come in long term and actually necessarily do. But at the same time, that would be up to the district attorney to make that decision, how she's doing that. I just make the point that so far, from a district attorney standpoint, I would say that they probably believe that so far the case is successful. And we can argue about what's qualified and what's not, but certainly I think that they would argue at this point the case has gone from a successful pattern for somebody that's been denigrated and said is totally unqualified. I did want to go into these trips. How much was the money? Go ahead. Thank you.
Was that a question? Because I'd like to respond if it is.
Yes.
Okay. I took notes because there were a couple different questions in there. So the first one, you said about how much money. So Ms. Willis had stated that it would be between $3 or $4 million to actually pay Mr. Wade completely to prosecute this case. So you'd be able to hire a number of prosecutors. Some of them do come and go, but most of the prosecutors we've seen on this case have been there since the beginning. So, you know, unfortunately, these cases take time, so people may leave. You also asked me about that this money was delegated for this, and I just wanted to make sure that my testimony was accurate. This money was never delegated for this. The county did not ever delegate this. The county was not involved in that at all. Ms. Willis is the one that decided, and there's no budget. There's no transparency at all on this.
She does the contract with him, and I believe you showed those contracts. So in that sense, it's delegated to him because that contract can end at any time. She could say, hey, the contract, because he works at her pleasure.
Oh, yes.
So that contract can actually end at any time. That would be the point.
Yes.
On the trips, how much total were the trips?
About $20,000.
And I think it was about $17,059. But even if we say $20,000, what was the average cost of each one of those trips?
I don't know. Unfortunately, they did not provide all of the records, so I can't tell you exactly. All I can tell you is what Mr. Wade charged on his credit cards. I can't tell you. Most of it was paid in cash, so there's no record. So I wish I could tell you, but...
Going by your slide, one was $3,335, one was $4,453.
Which one? Hold on, I want to make sure I'm clear on each.
You had 6 trips.
Okay, but which trip are you talking? Well, you said one is $3,000 something. I want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah, put it back up for me, please.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
So the first one, Royal Caribbean, 3,335. Aruba, 4,453. And then we see the next one, and then the next two. How would that compare? I mean, what is that so unusual on price points as far as trips are concerned?
No, I mean, I don't think so. The Royal Caribbean, so I can tell you because I know these records really well. I mean, Royal Caribbean, I specifically kept out the money that he spent on his mom's cabin. So they had two cabins. His mom had a cabin. They had an oceanfront balcony. For the Bahamas, I think oceanfront balcony is probably upper middle. But I don't know that it matters. Flew comfort class.
What, honey? None of
Not
this
unnormal
matters.
for a lawyer.
None of this matters.
Do you know what maybe the average American spends on vacation?
Zero.
Not this much.
You don't think?
Zero.
Have you looked?
Huh? No, I haven't, but I would imagine most of the Fulton
Why
County
don't you
taxpayers
stop?
would love to go on any of these trips.
Well, if you
Stop it.
Since you speculate, well, I
Stop
can
it.
speculate and say that you did look, and that's why you didn't put it in your brief,
I did
because
not.
Forbes actually says that the average is about $3,700 that
Yeah.
a person spends
So why
on
don't
a
you shut the
vacation.
fuck
For a
up?
single person or a family?
Family of four. Well,
Okay.
at that time, they were taking 2 and 3 at the time.
That makes
so
sense.
That makes, that's about
no,
normal.
hold on. I want to make sure that's clear. You said they were taking 2 or 3 at a time. All of these, I made very certain that my numbers only included the 2 of them. So
Listen,
the one trip
stop
that they
it.
took
But
his
it's
mother on,
2
Stop
adults.
it.
2 adults, yes.
It's
No.
nothing extraordinary.
So
There's
you said
nothing
3,700 for a
extraordinary.
family of 4.
Right.
That does not surprise me. For families that can afford to go on vacations, does not surprise me.
So it's basically what the average American would do.
So that's
Yes.
this is half of that for 2 people. So you said 3,700
Oh
for
my
a family
God,
of 4.
girl.
This is for 2 people.
You're losing the culture
it's just
war
2
on this
people.
one.
Right.
She's totally missing the
So
mark.
that
She sounds
Yes.
like a fucking
So it wouldn't necessarily be lavish. It's 2
Asshole,
adults. Bottom line
jealous
is it's not
parent.
extravagant. It's not lavish, is it?
the law only says $100. So,
But it's not lavish.
That's one of the reasons I didn't include all the Ubers. I quite frankly didn't want to do the
Oh,
math. But there were a ton
my.
of Ubers on each of these trips. There was a hotel at the beginning of
Dear
the Royal
Lord.
Bahamas. I didn't include that.
Dear
I didn't
Lord,
want to do the math,
please.
and I also did not want to.
And how much does Ms. Willis make?
maybe. Do
200
we?
and something thousand a year.
And so your
It's in my brief.
argument is
Is
that a person who makes $200,000 a
should
year
be able to
is
afford
actually
that?
setting up prosecutions to go on
A
a trip that costs
$5,000.
$3,500.
Yeah. Is
That's
that
your
it?
argument.
Is that where we're at
not
now?
in isolation. I mean, you're talking about in isolation.
No,
That
I'm
in
not talking about in isolation. I'm talking about what's in briefs.
Just totally.
I don't know what else you
yeah.
may be speculating about. I'm just talking about what's in briefs that says this is the benefit that she got. And all
Right.
I'm saying is that I got a person who's making $200,000 and the benefit that
This
you're
is a
putting
very
into the
important
briefs, not what you may
questioning
say
that
that
needs
you
to
may
be out
find
in the
elsewhere.
public.
But the benefit in the briefs is I go on a trip with $3,300, $4,400. And they have made up all these prosecutions to go on a 3-day cruise for $3,300. I mean, that's your argument. That's your argument, that's your argument.
That's not.
That's in the brief.
That's not our argument. So, we did
What else
argue
is
for
in the
about
brief?
3
100%
hours.
your
What else is in the
argument, kid.
brief?
What else is in the brief?
Yes.
A lot of facts, a lot of law.
No, as far as
No,
actual
it's not.
financial
You
benefit.
just tell them. Tell me.
So the financial benefit that I put in the brief was what I could prove. I did not want to have any,
Well,
as
then
you call
you
it,
didn't have
speculation.
any
I did
other
not want to speculate
evidence.
about anything else.
'Cause you
So I
didn't
did not
have any
know if
evidence. You're
Mr.
doing
Wade
plenty
paid for an
of
Uber that
speculating.
Miss Willis was literally sitting in at the same time. You can kind of assume because it's from the airport to
Oh
the
my
hotel, but I did
God.
not want to speculate to that. So I didn't include those in the numbers.
I
So the hard numbers in
don't
here are all of these numbers that are
That's
on
what's in
trips.
brief.
Yes, the ones that I actually had hard numbers that I
don't
knew that
wanna
she
be
had. Yes, that's in the brief.
In our business, we deal with proof, and so that's the proof that we have.
Exactly. That's what I
that
did.
person
Yes.
Yeah.
is doing all of this for that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And
That's it.
so what I
That's what you
included
got.
was what I had the actual hard proof of.
Okay.
And then some of it's attached to the brief. Some of it I got by
She
subpoena.
said,
So some of it is actually
I paid it
exhibits
back
that
in
were
cash.
admitted. I think I submitted to you all the
So unless
certified
you can
business
prove
records
that
from a
she
couple
didn't.
different travel agencies. Those are actually admitted.
We're
and there
done
were
here.
a lot of other receipts that I had that I did not know for sure if they were joined, and so I didn't include those. And I haven't
Good.
talked
And you
about them
shouldn't,
today.
correct?
And you shouldn't.
Exactly.
That's correct.
I 100%
Yeah.
agree.
So this is what we're dealing with.
Yes, you're dealing
Yeah.
with the stuff
Okay.
that's
So you're
hard
dealing
proof.
with what, but
Correct.
it's not.
That.
And it's
So my
all
next
hearsay.
question then becomes,
Because you haven't proven that she didn't pay him back.
going to conflict as far as his
there.
salary is concerned, just curious. Is it the amount of salary that you really creates the conflict? I mean, because we get stuck on money a lot. So is the amount of salary that gets is creating this conflict in your mind?
No,
Or
it's
it's
the
just the
fact that
fact that he gets any salary at all?
No, it has nothing to do with that. I did not make any allegations against Mr. Floyd or Ms. Cross. It's the fact that they were sleeping together and he was paying for trips for them to go on, and they were hiding it from the taxpayers.
Which we just discussed that.
That's why.
So if there's not a trip, then you don't believe there's a conflict?
Oh, I do, because of the Fulton County laws. The laws say that they
I'm
can.
not understanding the county codes, but I'm talking about as far as like what the case law says, which is what the judge is actually going to. If they're not hiding that or against the Fulton County ordinances,
I think this
They
needs
were
a
hiding
soundtrack.
do you believe that there's a conflict? If they brought it out and said, hey, we're dating, is it a conflict in your mind?
They only brought it out once I alleged it, and they called me a liar multiple times.
What I'm saying is that they brought it out, would it be a conflict in your mind?
If
Is it
they-
a conflict?
Here in a
And what would be the conflict?
So in a perfect world, what you're asking is if Miss Willis had gone to the Board of County Commissioners and said, I'm having an affair with this man, but he is brilliant and he would be an amazing prosecutor on this election interference case. Can I have an appropriations of $3 million and I will get it done? And she had said, and I'm going to go on vacations with him and we're going to date and we're actually going to go home to the safe house that Fulton County's paying for and he's going to be here for 4 hours at night. If she had said all that and they had given what they gave in Exhibit J, knowing that, Exhibit J, we wouldn't be here.
So then your client actually has no conflict, because that would still exist. Your client has no hard conflict then. There's no actual conflict. It doesn't matter if you disclose a conflict. If you disclose a conflict, it still exists. And that's exactly what they said in one of the cases that you cited. If a person says, I got a conflict, but I'm still going to testify against you. I know I represented you, and I have a conflict, and I'm going to go testify against you. Conflict is now over. Absolutely not. If you have an actual conflict where your client is harmed, just because they disclose it doesn't end that conflict. So what you're describing is not a conflict
broke
at all.
up. You're
You're
right.
just saying, I caught somebody, so therefore I'm going
I
to
don't
create
know.
something and
Good
call it a
morning,
conflict.
Siegfried.
You cannot waive a
I
conflict
don't know if
like
he's
that.
done. You know,
You just could.
so
If your
listen.
client is, you could not do that for your own client.
There can be
if your client is
improprieties.
actually
It can
suffering
happen,
harm,
but it's an
as
ethics
far as how the
violation.
prosecution
So
is taking
figure it
place,
out
because that's
internally.
what a conflict is.
And if there's an
Just because
evidentiary
she
issue,
says,
then
oh,
they're
I'm doing these
disqualified.
things,
Okay?
you're not going to go to
They're
your client and say,
tampering or all that
you
shit.
actually
They
have
haven't proven
actual
shit.
harm, but she said
She
it, so
hasn't
we're going
proven
to still
shit.
go forward.
She's proven
that
two
makes
people
absolutely no sense.
boinked
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
and went on a
to me.
cruise. And
I don't know what
You
you're
don't
asking.
have
said,
a
I-
conflict if you're saying if she disclosed it, it would go away. Then there is no
No,
conflict.
no. I did not say that. I said we would not be here if that had happened.
Right,
That's
because
what
you
I said.
wouldn't claim there's a conflict.
No, because we
What?
wouldn't be here because it violates so many of the Fulton County statutes and ordinances and
This
the
is
state statutes
crazy.
that we wouldn't be here because it wouldn't have been approved.
I do
But if she
love him.
disclosed it, not the way you said it.
He's brilliant.
But if it was disclosed,
hold
it's
on.
disclosed
If
now,
she
what is the
disclosed
conflict?
Point is,
undisputed
your
facts, the
client
facts
was
that we all,
offered a
you know,
plea
your
deal
side and my
and
side.
How is your
Counselor.
client harmed? That's my question.
How was your
Hold on, I'm trying to
client
answer your
harmed?
first question
That's
now.
it.
So if all the undisputed facts, if those had been in front of the Board of County Commissioners, we wouldn't be here because there would not have been a contract, because it's in contravention
Okay, but
of
there would have
law.
been
So
another
we would not be
prosecutor.
here. I would not be
Bitch.
bringing a motion
There would have been
because who
another
knows if my client would have been
prosecutor. So
indicted.
you would
Now,
have-
I
your client
wish
would
we
have
could
been
go back in
indicted.
time
Is that what
and
you're
undo that
saying?
and see, but we
Is
can't.
that what
And
you're
so
saying?
Mr. Wade was in the grand jury. He should not have been there. He should not have been appointed. Had the Board of County Commissioners known all of the facts of the case, he would never have been appointed to this case. So we can't now
Are you just gonna remove
speculate
him?
as to what
Why?
could have happened.
What case
the one
law do you
who
point to
created-
prove that?
Yeah, what is
Oh,
the
the
case law?
statutes. It's
No, it's not stat, not Fulton County statute. I'm asking for Georgia Court of Appeals, Georgia Supreme Court. Is there any case that says that? And there's not.
no, and it's really not surprising, honestly, because can you imagine this happening? I mean, honestly,
happens.
in December, would you have imagined this happening? I think most people wouldn't
All
have.
sorts of conflicts are taken up by the Court of Appeals.
I
and
can
Supreme
tell
Court.
you, I have found some cases in other jurisdictions, but I have never found a case in Georgia where, and mind you, this only happens in Fulton County. So we're talking about Fulton County cases where there would be a special prosecutor appointed, because it's the only place that this happens. So otherwise, maybe the AG. So you're talking about a prosecutor sleeping with the person that she is appointing to do this work, paying exorbitant amount of money, not getting county approval, not filing.
Is she paying him, or is he earning the money because he's actually billing hours because he's prosecuting the case?
That I mean, I don't,
He's
I wasn't
billing hours
there.
because he's prosecuting a case, correct?
I
A
would
case that a
assume- I
grand
would
jury
hope.
indicted.
I would hope that he's billing based on work that he's doing. I don't know because I don't have proof of that, and the billing is very irregular. But I don't know, so I
What
But
don't.
I mean,
you?
words
Are
do
you a-
matter
are
when we
you an
say that
ethics
she's not paying
attorney?
him in
You-
that
you
sense.
work for the
He's
Board of
earning he's
Professional
earning
Responsibility
money
or
for a
something?
case that he in charge of prosecuting that a grand
Get the
jury
fuck
indicted,
out.
and that's where we are.
You're
That's-
correct. She is not paying him. The Fulton County taxpayers are.
As they pay every prosecutor, as they pay every public defender, and every government official
Exactly.
that actually exists.
Oh my God,
100%.
people spent their
And that he
salaries.
is part of that process.
Go crazy.
And he is prosecuting a case that you're involved in, correct? He is he's prosecuting, and he's been integral in that prosecution. And you've said that.
I mean, he has been very involved. Integral to me means that
So
he
then what does it
is
matter?
necessary.
Whoa, now she's backing off her earlier statement. Get the
Jones,
fuck
are you
out of
getting
here.
close?
Yes, sir. I just had one last question, and that was, in the case that you cited, it clearly says,
Which case? I'm sorry.
in
Witten?
Whitworth versus State, it clearly says, the prosecutor should see no unfair advantage in taking advantage of the accused. That creates the conflict. What unfair advantage has he done in this case?
And you've asked me a lot of questions about Whitworth. I would love a chance to read it if you have a few minutes, just so I can actually respond. I don't have it in front of me, and there's a lot of cases out there, and I want to make sure I respond accurately.
Sure, I
Oh,
have
but it was
Okay.
kind of
Yeah,
an important
absolutely.
case.
Thank
in
you. I'm
your
sorry.
fucking
I'm
motion.
one of those people on visual. I like to see
Stupid
it.
cunt. Fuck off. You do not. You don't know because you've been
Thank you.
caught. You've been caught.
While she's looking at this, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. I wanted to let the public know how you can get information to us. Each senator on the committee has a separate email address for
we should
committee
email them.
business. And it's simply the last name of the senator. In my case, it would be calcert.inv@senate.ga.gov. INV, obviously, for Investigation Committee. So each senator, their last name, .inv@senate.ga.gov. And David Cook
We
is
gotta
sitting
win
over
state
here in the
houses,
corner as the
people. We
Secretary
gotta
of the
get
Senate.
Democrats in state
He
houses
is going to
because they're
be
the only
the
real
safekeeper of
legislators.
any documents or evidence that we accumulate. His email address for this purpose will be cook.inv@senate.ga.gov. I've had a number of citizens that have reached out and wanted to provide information or be heard or testify possibly in front of this committee. And we are encouraging anybody that has input or information that might be helpful to us to provide it to a committee member, ideally to cook.inv@senate.ga.gov, because Secretary Cook will provide it to all committee members. We don't have a next meeting scheduled yet, but it will be no more than a couple of weeks away. Ms. Merchant, you may not be able to have completed your testimony today, and we may have to call you back for additional questioning after today, but I'm not rushing. Take your time to read
Can it not be the first week of April?
that. Yeah,
Cobb County spring break, please.
that'd be fine.
Thank you.
That'd be fine.
Okay, yeah,
you're
no,
gonna- your ass
I'm
is
so glad.
gonna pay for it.
So this
Why'd
is
you take that
Morgan. When you said
$5,000
Morgan,
plea deal?
it should have, J-Tom, it should have struck with me. I remember this now. So this case, so J-Tom was actually the district attorney when he first took this case, and he was not.
Don't talk, wait.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the microphone. I'm not good at that, sorry.
Aren't you though?
He took employment later on. So the employment, so it's different than our case because he took employment later on. He wasn't actually paid hourly.
Oh, really?
He was a member of Prosecuting Attorneys Council. And I'm glad you brought that up because that was one thing that I didn't really go into earlier.
Really?
The other way
Go into it
that
now.
counsel is usually appointed in these cases is the Prosecuting Attorneys Council actually appoints it. And that's what happened in that case. But they sometimes will pay an hourly rate if it's something that is needed, but in that case, he was actually the district attorney in another county. And that's what I've experienced before. So the 2 times I've had special counsel, it's been because it's somebody from outside
Okay,
in
and what's
another
the point?
jurisdiction that's brought in.
Okay,
So
so
that's
what's
what
the
happened in this
point,
case. But
honey?
then he took a job later. The other big
the
difference
point?
with that case, and this came up in our oral arguments with the judge, that's a post-conviction case. The standard of review is very different post-trial than it is pre-trial. We're in a
They're jumping-
pre-trial
they're
posture.
jumping around.
That, and we talked about that because
This
the
has been
judge
very
asked us a
illuminating,
similar question
actually.
about how to distinguish that. That's the big issue, and the judge pointed that out. That is post-trial. Post-trial, we have harmless error review. It's not a
I
great
highly
review.
recommend,
So, it's
us-
just like
I'm gonna
ineffective
clip
assistance of
the
counsel.
last part
If you
where
stop the
the
harm before it
gentleman, the
happens,
Democrat,
it's a different
questions
review
her
than if
because he
you fix
really
the
did a
harm
great
after it's
job
already
of
done. It's
breaking
really
this
hard
down
to
for what it
overturn a
is.
conviction once the conviction happens, and that's what you have there.
But in this case, they never got to the harmless error review because they said that no conflict existed. I understand what you're talking about by the harmless error, but they didn't never discuss that because no conflict existed. And you're right, it is post-conviction, but bottom line is you really did not address the aspects that I was talking about when they
Meet
say
my
is
cats
a
and
conflict.
my husband.
And it's
I mean
not
my
me
father. I mean my
putting this
husband.
case in, talking about a conflict. It was the case that you guys actually did cite.
I know.
With that,
I
Mr.
need
Chair,
to actually, yes.
Can I at
Let's
least answer
fucking
that
go.
question?
Oh my God. We're gonna find it.
We
We're
definitely
gonna
cite
find
it
gal.
because we have, both myself and my husband have a very strong policy of citing everything. We don't hide cases. So if there's something that's adverse to our position, we're going to cite it and we're going to explain it. We don't hide behind it. So we cite adverse authority all the time.
Adverse authority, but that's fine.
The oral arguments that we did, that was how the oral arguments started. So.
All right, so that line of question deals specifically with the legal principles involved in your motion to disqualify. As I understand it, you're not really claiming a conflict of interest between defendants, et cetera. It's the conduct of the prosecutor.
Yes.
That
Yeah, there's
is
no
improper
conflict.
conduct.
Yeah, we're not
Okay.
talking about the conflict between defendants.
We're talking about the fact
Oh,
that
okay.
the DA's office failed to follow state law and get an approval, failed to follow county policies to get approval of her budget and this contract, that he was not eligible to have been hired had he been disclosed because of, you referred to it as nepotism, but it's relationships
Yes.
with, and your complaints are of she's receiving a financial benefit of gifts of more than $100, which violate county policies.
Yes, county and state. So and we attached that to one of the briefs, her return where she filed it under oath that says,
Okay.
I mean, it specifically says if you've got something over $100, you have to disclose it.
And
Here it
then-
is. It's so it's called the Fulton County Income and Financial Disclosure Report, and that says, and it says pursuant to Section 2-79 of the Fulton County Code of Ethics, that anytime you've got each gift or favor from a single prohibited source in the aggregate amount of $100 or more. And then it says, for purposes of this section, gift and favors means anything of value given by or received from a prohibited source. Prohibited source means any person, business, or entity that the involved officer, so Ms. Willis, knows or should know is seeking official action or is seeking to do or doing business with the county. So obviously that would apply.
Okay. And failing to respond to your open records request and potentially giving false testimony under oath if your version of facts is proven to be true.
Yes.
Okay. Keep us posted. I guess we'll keep reading the press as to how your case progresses, I guess there.
All right, we're gonna find it,
I'm
gal.
troubled about this Find the Votes book.
Oh no, he's
Are
totally.
you saying that the prosecutor has been discussing an ongoing prosecution and her prosecutorial strategy
No.
and indictment
This guy's the
strategy
twisty
to
McTwister
authors
son.
of a book during the course of the prosecution?
Yes.
And
yes.
that book is now come out?
It is. It's.
And
I don't think I brought it. with
Let's
me.
do it.
No, I have a copy. We admitted a copy at the hearing. No, it's out there. It was published.
Is that a violation of ethical obligations in some way to be publicly discussing, just like the public statements you made about the guilt of a defendant, et cetera?
Yes, definitely, and we alleged that and argued that as far as forensic misconduct. It's very surprising, shocking, and I don't know that there's a ton of cases on it, but that book Also, we talked about it somewhat in our hearing because it goes into a lot of details about the financial troubles that Ms. Willis had prior to becoming DA. And so, it talks about that a lot.
Are you kidding me? You
Is
are
she
such
getting
a
a
cunt.
financial benefit from
You are
that
such a
book?
I don't know.
Is she getting a
cunt.
royalty or a payment for having been a contributor to it?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But I know her dad testified that he was interviewed for it. He came to the district attorney's office and was interviewed for it as well. And I think that was when her dad first learned that she had dated Mr. Wade, I think. But I may be wrong. Or maybe that's the first time they met, something like that.
All right. Well, thank you for your willingness to testify before us, and the documents you provided. We'll need some time to analyze and review those. And again, all committee members have access to those. At David Cook's office, he's got them literally locked up in a room. We are not making copies or disseminating those. I will review the documents in more detail, and I'll confer with you, Senator Jones, if you're able to, and we can agree on what should be kept confidential there. I noticed some bank records and things that if it were me being investigated, I probably wouldn't want it divulged to the public. I don't think that's necessary for us to do our job here. I do appreciate everybody's attendance, and thank you all for making time to be here on our committee day.
Okay,
We'll
you
keep you
motherfucker.
posted
Stupid
further
mother
meetings.
mediocre
Meeting is adjourned.
motherfucker. Okay, fuck that. Okay, yes, I'm gonna find, hold on. Let me find out. Okay, so it's Senate Special Committee on Investigations. Hold on. Let me get that out of there. Hold on. We're going to find it. Hold on to your love. Georgia Senate Special Committee on Investigations. Stop. Ba ba da ba 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 na da da wa hoo hoo. Oh, so far. Ooh, 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 ooh. Find some stuff. Hold on, hold on. Special Committee on Investigations. Investigations. Bum, 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 ba, da, da. I want to find the part where he talks. I want to find his name. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, wait. J.A. Republican. Da, 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 da. Oh, come on, Tammy. You need to give me all the information. Yeah, give me all the information. Who is on this frickin' committee? Where do they have the members of this committee? I'm very upset. I'm very upset about this. Why aren't you telling me who's on this frickin' committee? Who's the members of the committee? Yeah. Why aren't you telling me? Okay, Democrat on GA Senate Committee on Investigations. Oh God, I don't even think that's gonna work. Oh wait, here we go. What's this? I think it was, is it Harold Jones? Hold on. You got to hold on to your love. You've got to hold on. Whoa, whoa. I think it is. Okay, so let me come back. Let me entertain you. Hold on. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. Okay, so I think this is the gentleman. He's the minority whip in the Senate in Georgia. So I think he is the person who was very heroic just a minute ago, and did a wonderful questioning. And I really, really think we need to reach out. Now, where's his I thought they had a address. I thought they had a. So does that mean? Oh, wait. Okay, so Harold V. Jones. Wah, wah, Luigi. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Wait. Oh, there he is. Okay. So I want to go there. Oh, here we go. Contact. Bling, bring, 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 bring. What? Wait, what? Let me see what's happening there. Let me see what it loads, okay? His birthday's August 1st. Happy birthday to you. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so, well, they gave us the format for the email, so I'll have to go back and listen to it unless somebody remembers it. So unless someone remembers the format for the emails, Truth Social needs more honest clips. We need to clip his. Listen, yes, I'm gonna actually go now and clip that part. And we need to find the Koch brothers. Well, of course, or the Mercers. There's a bunch of people that could be paying those bills. The book wasn't admissible, gal. Hello. There was nothing about evidence in this. Hey, Robert. Truth Social, yeah. I mean, has Trump said anything about Truth Social suing him? Has he said anything about that? Is he just not going to say anything about that? Okay. Oh my God. Okay, so here's the big takeaway for me. The big takeaway from this was the Mr. Jones said to Miss Merchant, "You're telling me that your complaint is that he's being enriched." Oh, Calvert INV. I think it's INV. I think it was senate.ga.gov. Okay. Oh, good job, SB. Excellent job. I think it is going to be Jones INV at senate.ga.gov. Need to verify. I wonder if it's that. I have a big kitty coming to say hello. Oh, sorry about the stupid crown. I don't know how to fix it. So dumb. Goddamn Streamlabs. So anyway, we'll verify that. So don't take that as gospel. Um, but excellent. Thank you so much, SB. It takes an entire chat to make anything happen. So yeah, I mean, gal, Tina, what Tina has on Mike Roman is insane in the membrane. So I think, yeah, I think it'd be a great connection. Hey man, anybody that'll listen, right? Anybody that wants to look at data. We got your data right here. We got your data right here. I had a dream last night that I was singing. Oh shit, it just left my mind. It was a song that I made up, and it was like a Berlin type of feel, right? Like it was like a 90s synth vibe kind of feel song. But now I got to remember what it was. I guess I have to go back to sleep. I think Calvert too is he's the head of it, right? Anyway. Yeah. Yeah. Jones, oh yeah, that's me. Also, send this open Substack. Yes. 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 Call to action. Call to action. We alert, 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 alert. Call to action. Alert, alert, alert. do what Gal says. Click that link and send that to Mr. Jones. And send it to Mr. Calvert. Why not? Let's send it to everybody. Flood the zone. I mean, they're emails, so, it's not like we're not trying to stop anything. We're trying to inform. A duty to warn. Anyway, all right, my loves. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I didn't expect this, but it was a delightful surprise that we had an opportunity to be together. So I very much appreciate it. There's old videos of Roman in there too. He's a dick. Yeah, he is a dick. He's like a little mini Roger Stone almost, like a Canadian Roger Stone. Right? Is that how you might describe him, Michael Roman, as a Canadian Roger Stone? A Tim Hortons, if you will. Also, totally off topic, but please send me your ideas for painting rocks. Yes! I love you. Too, I just painted. Oh, I would love to promote your rock painting business. If you didn't know, Gal Suburban is an amazing artist. In addition to being a kick-ass person and OSINT, she's also an amazing artist. She's a good visual artist. Oh, and she's funny as fuck. So she's also a comedian. She's also a performing artist because she's funny as fuck. We have funny friends, don't we, here at the lounge? Please, no words on the rocks. Live, laugh, and love. Live, laugh, love. Piss, poop, wipe. I was trying to think of something super disgusting. I guess I did. Sorry. No offense to the live, laugh, love crowd, but what a crock of shit. Life sucks. Live, laugh, whatever. You did, Siegfried? You painted? Gal is AI. That's right. Oh, faces for sure. Googly eyes. I want googly eyes somewhere in the equation. Kind of a three-dimensional mixed media. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm fucking losing my shit. Oh my god. That's funny. Nothing's real. So the hearing was 3 hours long. Yeah, it was. It was 3 hours. And the best part was the end. Yeah, the best part was actually the end. All right. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, you guys. It was so nice to see you this morning. I'm so happy. I really love it. Um I'm so happy. I got all screwed up with my scheduling of live streams this week, so I'm saying yeah, laugh and cry. Um I got all screwed up with my scheduling, and then I had tech issues, but I got a used computer that is fantastic, and so I think we've cracked some code. We've got more codes to crack, but I will be live tomorrow, both in the morning and at night. Oh my God, it's a double dose of Lolo on Thursday. Woo woo. In the morning, we have a surprise hearing about January 6th, and Officer Fanone is rumored to be there. So around 7 a.m., a little before then, on the West Coast, 10 on the East, etc. I'll be live, and we'll see what's happening. And then at night, we have SODU. We have the State of the Union. So I'll be live for the State of the Union as well tomorrow night. So please join me for one or both. I certainly hope you do. And I hope the rest of your Wednesday, your hump day, goes swimmingly, and that nothing gets in your way. All right, so fuck all the haters, and don't push me 'cause I'm close to the edge. Anyway, yeah, I don't like people being mean to my friends. Don't be mean to my friends, 'cause yeah, don't. Anyway, all right, I love you guys. Take care. See ya. Don't do anything I would do. And please, please, please come back tomorrow morning, and I'll see you. Maybe we'll do a space tonight. I don't know what's happening with Gal Squad, but maybe we'll do a space. I have no idea. So, see you later. Did Merchant say she has to go to McAfee's court? Signal me. LOL. XOXO, everyone. No, she has to go to some other thing. Some other, I don't think it's McAfee. He's doing something that isn't, he's doing some other trials today. So, yeah, have a great day. You too, Robert. Everybody have a wonderful day. Way to go, Joe Biden. Fuck yeah. And I hope everybody voted. So, that had to vote. I mean, if you didn't have a primary, you didn't have to vote, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, have a great one. See you later. Bye. Bye. Oh, Siegfried, I should think about that. I wonder if I can like record things down to a podcast. I'll have to see. That's a good idea. I haven't thought about that. I actually have I have a special project I'm working on along those veins. So, stay tuned. No open primary in Florida. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, bye. Hi, Pert. Yay! Mail in ballots. Mail in ballots. Mail in ballots. Woo, woo, woo. Yeah, give you the Wi-Fi password. That's right. Unlimited data. All right, bye. I love you guys, really. You're the best. Bye.